I never asked you. We didn't do an intro.
Oh, right, we didn't do an intro. People have been listening to us for like 3.5-ish hours, and they have no idea who this clown is.
Through the
Okay.
power of editing, this will be at the front.
Yes, the power of editing. Hello, everyone. My name is Silenced Hero. You can call me Silenced, you can call me Hero, you can call me Burrito if you want. I don't really care. So, I am a goofy goober YouTuber who makes a lot of perk videos talking about why people do not like using certain characters' perks. I talk about the psychology about perk design, I talk about balance. Most of the time it's about balance. But I also like to look at perks and whether they are in a good spot at the moment, or if they can get quality of life changes. And I've also recently started branching out, talking about other things in Dead by Daylight, such as the recent patches that we've been getting, and more importantly, Skull Merchant with her rework 2.0 iteration, which I don't really like what they've been doing this time. Uh,
uh,
I already have the dev notes up on my screen. I can share the link with you. Hold on.
okay, that works.
Yeah, no, I've been looking at this for like the last 3 days, just trying to make sure I got everything down.
Uh,
Yeah, no, I am locked in on this conversation because Skull Merchant is a character that you cannot just talk about willy-nilly. You actually have to have a PhD in Skull Merchantology to understand what on earth is happening.
man.
Because you could say, oh, drone rotates 5 degrees slower. All of a sudden, the entire community goes insane. Meanwhile, the Skull Merchant players are like, yeah, this is fine.
Who brought up mirror shards in my chat? Don't do that. This is a no mirror shards household. Um.
Oh, ew.
Also, we're gonna bring this up. I didn't even think about this. I need to double check Skull Merchant's add-ons.
Oh, you have to double check them
They
because
did because
you want.
they
I
mentioned
don't even know.
they mentioned nothing about adjusting them.
Yeah, why would they? They
But
didn't do it with the first rework. Why would they do it now?
but aren't there some that affect the haste and the hinder?
Yeah.
So what are they literally useless?
No, the Hinder one is probably going to be a must pick now because I think it's what's the add-on? It's a green add-on, I know. I'm trying to remember its name. It's the stupid little green matchbox looking thing.
Vital targeting processor
I believe that's the one.
increases the strength of the hindered status effect for claw trap survivors when detected by drones by -3%.
Yeah, so pretty much with the nerf it would make it 8% slow, which
Behavior,
is almost
behavior,
identical.
behavior. Can you please get a mathematician? That is not how you word. I know what it means. I know what they mean, but you cannot say increases by -3%. That's not
Yeah, yeah, no, like this character doesn't make
you.
sense. Why
That's
do you think so many people cry about her?
so okay. So for those who don't know, increases would mean add, by would
Yeah,
mean multiply, and then
yeah.
-3 would mean you're taking the multiplicate. No, the additive of the final number. That's not how. Okay, whatever. They make me so
Yeah, no,
mad with that crap.
yeah, Skull Merchant players aren't even bothered with the wording of that one. They're instead bothered by advanced movement prediction and geographical readout because they can't tell which one's which with the icon.
Oh my god. Okay, I'll show
It's
it.
just the radar, but with like a different picture in the middle. But when you look on the screen, it's like 3 pixels large. The only way to tell is by moving the mouse, but people don't know how to read. This is Dead by Daylight we're talking about.
No, guy in a cave. It's no. This is a you. If you want to use mirror shards, that's perfectly fine. Just don't say I like them. That's just my only rule. I will die on the hill that mirror shards is one of the worst add-ons in the game. Um, yeah, I'm just hang on. Let me see here. Increases the strength of the. They're getting rid of the haste, aren't they?
Yes, they are completely removing the haste.
So expired batteries does nothing now.
Does it? Let me look.
Increases the
Oh
strength
my
of
goodness, you're
haste.
right, it doesn't. It just reduces the battery life of the clutch arms by 50! So the cuts are going to last for like 22.5 seconds
How
because it's a
much?
45-second
How
duration.
much? How much? I'm gonna call this now. This is coming up before the PTB, by the way. I'm uploading this tomorrow.
Mm.
Um, how much?
Oh, heck yeah.
How much do you want to bet? And I'm gonna call this now. They forget to change the wording on all of these.
Oh, I 100% think they're going to forget because they did it before with the Skull Merchant 2.0. So you know the add-ons that made Skull Merchant infamous for the 3-gen meta.
Not offhand, no. Was
It
it?
was shotgun speakers
Mm-hmm.
and Eddie Valente issue number 1. And on the off chance generator, that one was also used for 3-gen merchants. Shotgun speakers and Eddie Valente issue number 1. You would expect these two to get reworked because they were extremely problematic. Because they made the skill checks difficult, or like shotgun speakers made it so you didn't get the sound for a skill check, and Eddie Valente just made it so the skill check zone was smaller.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't change it. The only difference was that it only affected Claw Trap survivors. They could have done anything with these two add-ons, but they decided, nah, leave it for the Claw Trap survivors. Because these two add-ons haven't caused enough PTSD in the player base just yet.
You know,
And now
another
they're just dead.
another thing we'll get into here is I was like, okay, well, she has one beam now. So the rotation speed add-on would actually be good. And then I remembered it slows it down.
Oh, low power mode. I love low power mode. It is going to be so great having just one scan line just stare into oblivion and do absolutely nothing.
Let me double check these. Hang on. Increases the tracking duration, suffers from blindness, reduces the duration of immunity by 75%. That actually got weaker, didn't it? They increased No, they didn't. No, never mind. Reduces the rotation speed by 100%. Um
Bennett, let me give you a secret.
mm-hmm.
All of Skull Merchant's add-ons are terrible. The only good one is a brown, and it has been good since day 0 of this character's reveal, and that was Ultrasonic Speaker. Because it was the only thing that brought joy in everyone's hearts. And then when they reworked it, it brought even more joy.
Increases the action speed of damaging generators and vaulting windows plus 20% after deploying a drone.
Oh yeah, no, Georita is a meme, but I love it. It's a good meme.
Yeah, other than expired batteries, nothing really gets affected by the change. Not
Yeah,
directly, anyways.
yeah.
Almost all of them are going to be indirectly hit, but
Yep.
that's
Like, don't worry, I'll be talking about how they are indirectly hit. We'll get to that much later, though.
it's funny because I'm looking at these and I'm like, prototype rotor, if they just make that 100, like the reverse of the low power one,
Mm-hmm.
I could actually see people running it with the newer, with the nerfed version they're bringing out.
Let
Because
me tell you.
if you're doubling the speed, you're essentially making it the two lines, but not really.
Yeah. Let me tell you something funny. There is a bit of a meme in the Skull Merchant community, and there isn't a name for it yet, but I call it Wendy's Merchant. You run prototype router, and you run low power mode. Low power mode sets the rotation speed to minus 100, and prototype router gives it a plus 10. So every kind of your drone, the stealth and the scouting is now a 10% turn rate. It is so slow. It's like Burger King Myers, but it's Wendy's Merchant. I wish I ran this more often. I never do, but I just keep forgetting. But it's such a meme build. I don't see enough people run it.
Behavior, if you're listening, by the way, I'm just, one, don't go through with all of this, but two, if you do, which we all know you're going to, but if you decide not to, that would be great too. But please, please don't let expired batteries literally be useless.
Oh, I'm sure they're going to.
Please. What the fuck? Okay, all right. Once again, there's no structure to this. So those listening on the YouTubes, we're just kind of just talking about this, but I guess the easy place to start is what the changes are exactly.
Yeah, that would probably be the best situation.
So,
Because
go on. Go on.
sorry. When it comes to Skull Merchant, when I was looking through the changes, there were a few that I thought were pretty okay. There were a few that I thought, it could be a little bit better if it was readjusted or just explored more. And then there were a few that I just really did not like. So let's talk about the good one first, which is, funnily enough, the first two changes that they did.
Mm-hmm.
So, just to clarify, they reduced the hinder penalty when scanned by a drone from 10 to 5. And the haste has been completely cut from the kit. So no more of the weird number logic of 3, 5, 6, 7% haste boosting. You don't gain it for like 12 seconds when you get scanned. You don't get 45 seconds because of a claw trap. It's completely cut and dry out of the character's kit. But the hinder is still there. It's just been cut in half. Overall, I really like these changes for Skull Merchant. Because this has been an ongoing battle with a lot of Skull Merchant mains, where a lot of people say that haste boosting was really fun back in the Skull Merchant 1.0 days for Chase because it was necessary. But with the addition of the hinder, it resulted in an awkward situation where the character just felt really unfair. Because for the survivor side, they just see Skull Merchant running at you at Mach 10 because someone across the map got tagged, and now she's just running 3% faster.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they're running 10% slower because they got claw trapped. And this leads into an awkward standoff where you are pretty much in a 13% difference in speed. And it could build up even more with perks, with add-ons, with the expired batteries, but no one ran expired batteries. But
Also with like you mentioned, with it like affecting, because it comes from people getting claw trapped. Unless you're unless your eyes are like a hawk on the HUD and you notice your teammate just got trapped, you have no idea she just got the increased speed.
Yeah. So in the case of Skull Merchant, there was already a lot that was in her kit. And a lot of people like to bring up Clown when it comes to Skull Merchant. I am not innocent from this. I always bring up Clown when it comes to Skull Merchant.
Mm-hmm.
I just call Skull Merchant an overcomplicated clown. But in the case of Clown, his entire kit is based around manipulation of character movement, where the bottle is constantly slowing or speeding you up, and that is the character's core focus. Skull Merchant has a bit of a problem, where the developers have no idea what the focus is on Skull Merchant. With these nerfs, they're busy reeling her in to say, listen, the Antiloop is not the core focus. It's a secondary element that exists in the character's kit in order to help them just feel a little bit under control in the situations they need it, but it is not the core element. It's a secondary feature. I like this change. And I know a lot of Skull Merchants would have preferred having haste compared to hinder, but I think it is a much better option, because I personally viewed Skull Merchant's hinder as the most healthy in the game.
So we'll get to this with the other changes. I haven't really mentioned this or talked about it to anybody. Because of how the 3-gen meta kind of got, quote, fixed, would it be absurd for Skull Merchant to go back to the way she was with adjustments?
To bring back Skull Merchant 1.0?
Yeah.
I don't think it would be humanly possible.
Why is that?
The big problem with Skull Merchant 1.0 was power budget. Everything in Skull Merchant 1.0's kit was completely geared around information. Because this is what Behavior wanted with Skull Merchant initially. They want her to be this intel gathering, trap placement killer.
Right.
And 1.0 had that element, but leaned way too heavy on the intel gathering. And this leads into an awkward situation where in lower MMRs, she becomes a pub stomper because she knows exactly where every single person is on the map. And the one moment that a perk becomes meta relevant for heavy gen defense, like in the case of Eruption, when that got buffed, every single killer immediately, or it was a bit of a slow burn with Eruption initially, but over time people started to see more and more of how powerful it could be. It's why we had the 3-gen Knight meta for such a long time, because it was in the middle of how Eruption was becoming a lot more of a potent annoyance. because of this, a character who is built purely around intel gathering is going to be extremely obscene to play against for a low MMR player base. But in the case of a higher MMR player base, it just won't be plausible. The character just cannot function because their power budget leans too far into one direction that is very cosmetic, but everything else is very poor. The problem with old Skull Merchant 1.0 is that she had nothing outside of information. Because although she got claw traps and it had a dissolution effect, it needed the person to hack the drone. And if they stayed in the drone, they get exposed, sure, but they could just hack the drone, and a smart player would be able to understand how to loop in order to get as much time out of the claw trap before it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And simply put, it's just more so when it comes to perk design that leads into the problems of Skull Merchant 1.0. Because it was because of Call of Brine and Overcharge that led to her being a 3-gen menace, in addition to the 3-gen solution being non-existent initially. Because before, you were able to kick any generator as many number of times as you wanted, and you could constantly apply Call of Brine Overcharge. And these perks were a lot more tougher initially. Like, Call of Brine used to be a minus 200% regression. And if I remember, Overcharge used to build up to 400%, and it started at 100, right?
It was still 80, and then it built up to 400.
Ah, I see. But, like, it's because of perk design that I believe Skull Merchant 1.0 can't really work. Because another character I like to bring up that is very similar to Skull Merchant 1.0 is Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, the initial Doctor. Back in the day when he had the treatment and punishment mode. Because although it was a very cool idea of a stance swapper, the problem was that it built too far into intel gathering, and the lethality was cut dry, because the intel gathering was the core focus initially. If you want Skull Merchant 1.0 to work, you need to put lethality into the character's kit, but then it leads into more annoyance factors, because how do you put lethality into 1.0? Because 1.0 didn't have as much counterplay options as Skull Merchant 2.0. You couldn't crouch underneath the drones to avoid detection.
Mm-hmm.
If you got tagged when it wasn't scouting, it would go back in active mode and sit up in the air for 10 seconds, which could not be hacked. And when you do hack the drone, you still got claw trapped, meaning that you had to pay the price of playing the game well by having a claw trap that makes it so, oh, you want to vault that pallet? Too bad, it's completely gone. It's off the table now.
I think...
And
so something I would want, the idea of an intel killer, I actually would say a closer one, and I bring this up a lot, is Singularity.
Yeah.
Because I've had the theory for years, well, not years, but since Skull Merchant and Larry came out, that, because it was two teams that made them, but my theory was, what happened is the devs were like, okay, we need an intelligence killer, we need an intel killer, and they gave that docket of we need an intel killer to both of the teams.
Yeah.
And one of them made Skull Merchant, and one of them made Singularity. Because Singularity has a lot of similarities to Skull Merchant in the sense of yes, he does have a chase power and whatnot, and his power budget is there with the counterplay of the EMPs and such, but they're both, in essence, supposed to be intelligence gathering killers. But, like you mentioned, Skull Merchant was way more geared into just not just, but the intel gathering part of it was like the bigger thing with her.
Yes.
And I can agree. I do agree. It's just I don't like, because the problem with current Skull Merchant, I feel, is not just the haste and the hinder differential. It's also a lot of the counterplay, and this comes up with a lot of killers, is a lot of the counterplay, it's not that it's not there, it's that it's either unintuitive or really, really cumbersome.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm actually planning on talking about the other changes and the big problems of what they bring to the table when it comes to Skull Merchant's issues. But I will say, to build on your theory about the two teams working on the intel gathering sci-fi killers, I think this recent year of Dead by Daylight really solidifies this idea, because last year it was very focused on sci-fi.
Hmm.
Like, we got Skull Merchant, and then Singularity, and then Xenomorph. And then we had a few awkward characters that were thrown in every once in a while, like with Chucky and Unknown, I believe.
Yeah, unknown. Yeah.
And it feels like this year has been focused on classic. So or like classic to medieval in a sense,
Hmm.
because we got on Dungeons and Dragons, and then we got Lara Croft, who is a iconic classic video game character, and then we got Castlevania, and I have a feeling that this upcoming chapter is going to lean into this classic identity as well, where it's probably going to be a chapter that leans into like maybe like a old fable kind of character, or maybe something that's just iconic and a old classic tale for horror stories.
So,
Because it feels like this year has just been the year of classic ancient horror.
so for those who don't know, the way Behavior's teams work for making killers, they have two teams. At least this is what we've been told. They have two teams that make killers, which means that in theory, if it goes the way it's supposed to, one team makes one killer. So one team made Artist and one team made Sadako. So that means the team that made Artist made Dredge. The team that made Dredge made Skull Merchant. The team that made Skull Merchant made Xeno. The team that did Xeno did Unknown. Um, which would mean, like I said, with Singularity and Skull Merchant being right next to each other, one team did one team did the other. And I feel in the way most, and I've talked about this with League of Legends before, the way they describe making a character goes is they don't start with a grand idea. It's usually like a one sentence description of what the character is supposed to do, and then the team builds from there. So with Skull Merchant and Singularity, like I said, I think the one sentence docket was intelligence gathering killer, and they went from there. With Chucky and Xeno, it's a little different because they were licensed killers, so they already had their what's the word I'm looking for?
Power fantasy, I believe.
Yeah, the power fantasy, the identity of the character was already set in stone. But then even with like Vecna and Dracula, we just
Dracula,
saw
yeah.
they're while Dracula is a shape shifting character, the general idea for both of them is multiple powers.
Yep.
And whether that's coincidence or not is hard to fully say, but you know it is what it is. And we notice these trends all the time. Like I mean, for a while there, it was, I mean, Deathslinger and Pyramid Head are basically both zoning killers, anti-loop zoning killers. And then Nemesis, it could be a stretch. You could say he's also an anti-loop zoning killer. Behavior tends to go through phases with killers like that.
Oh yeah.
Even with,
And I feel sorry.
I was gonna say, even with like Sadako and Pinhead, they're both, their power essentially isn't the same, but they do both have passive slowdown mechanics. Wesker had a passive slowdown mechanic as well. So these ideas do get shared around with the developer, with the killer concept people. But I do think Skull Merchant's power budget definitely did go more into the intel, which, while I would love to see it done correctly, and I think Larry was the way to do it correctly, I do understand the issues it has and did have.
I will say though, looking at this lineup, I believe after Skull Merchant, the last few killers we've gotten were very focused on zoning and anti-loop. just like hold on. I need to pull up the DBD wiki. I just need to look at this lineup.
I mean, everyone's on here but Dracula. I mean, anti-loop killers we've got
like, it's just purely after Skull Merchant. We got Singularity, who can break pallets and vault at breakneck speeds. Xenomorph, who can hit over pallets. Chucky, who can vault under pallets and get a hit with a dash.
Not anymore.
Unknown, range. I mean, in the case of Unknown, no, actually, he's still a zoning killer. He's just Huntress 25. Vecna with the Skeleton Gang and Mage's Hand.
Can lift
and
up
then,
pallets.
Of course, yeah, he looks at pallets and goes like, no. And then we have Dracula, who's able to just cast Hellfire, or with those current buffs, just fly over it as a bat and then M1 instantly.
Oh, it's so fucking stupid.
Yeah, no, I don't see a problem with that. Clearly, we just need to nerf Skull Merchant again.
My favorite thing about the Dracula thing is that And I get it. There's differences there. I love that people were complaining about Scamper, but there's some people defending bat form going over pallets.
What? But why? You have a 2.5-second cooldown of swapping between a pretty much minuscule hitbox that can fly over a window or a pallet and remove counterplay, and then you just switch back and instantly M1. It's like Spirit, but worse.
Even like
Because
you can even just
it's a
turn into
mixture
wolf.
between Spirit. Actually, it's a mixture between Spirit and Nurse. They did it! It took them just a few years, but they did it. They finally beat Nurse. We've created Nurse 2.0.
It's funny too because, like, oh, well, what if they just run away? Well, one, the bat form is like way faster than them, and two,
Yeah?
even if you take the bat form out of the equation, just turn to wolf and pounce them.
Yeah, and
if you miss, just turn into if you miss, just turn into vampire form. They'll be in range for Hellfire.
True, and the argument for wolf form, like, it's just a garbage ability at the moment because of the removal of hug tech, which I feel sad for the people who miss it. I mean, it goes with the argument of text that we had a few days ago, but it's just weird. I don't know what they want to do with wolf form. Like, I saw it as like a tracking intel gathering part, but its power budget is so minusculely low. And it feels like everything was put into the bat and the vampire.
I feel like
the moment that the wolf form had any semblance of goodness with that stupid hug tech, they were like, no, the power budget cannot afford it. We must buff the bat more.
I feel like if the wolf form, I've had a couple ideas on how to buff wolf form. I feel like what they want wolf form to be is in between loops, but bat form does that now.
I kind of view it as like a gap closer, similar to something like Demo / Wesker Dash, where it's more so like you want to use it to gap close between like loops, because the fact that you're able to jump between one spot and then redirect. But the problem is, unlike Wesker, who has the immaculate egg, who is able to move just a little bit and shimmy to get to the proper position, Dracula doesn't have that. It's an instant flick jumping, and then you have to instantly flick again to jump again. You have no control. Anyways, we are getting off topic. Let's talk about let's talk about, according to the DVD community, the boring character.
What do you mean? She's not that bad. Actually, really, and this is where the divide I feel for a lot of people goes. I don't mind going against Skull Merchant.
Yeah, neither do I. It's more so the survivors I don't like when I see a Skull Merchant. Because when I see Skull Merchant, I rejoice, because I'm like, oh, happy days, I play this character, I know this character, I read this character's effect text first as my form of sleep insomnia. But no, sadly, the Survivor players base don't feel like that. They see this character's UI and they instantly disconnect, or they kill themselves on hook. And I feel like that's a big problem with the representation for Skull Merchant, just how the Survivor player base have reacted. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's just...
So, the next thing I do want to talk about, and I mentioned this in my patch notes video, the reducing the scan lines, which I think is probably the biggest thing here, honestly. The other two are whatever, but to me, I'm sure there's more we can talk about on it, but reducing the scan lines to 1.
This is a bit of an awkward one.
So in my patch notes video, the way I described it, there's a thing in game design called God, what is it?
I remember what you said.
It's distance of threat, or it's threat area, distance of threat, something like. Basically, it's the distance at which a character can interact with another character in a PvP game or a PvE, but mostly PvP. It's the distance that they can interact with the other character in a negative way. The reason why this is important is because it allows you to adjust power budgets depending on that range. For example, if a character can snipe you from off screen with something, you have to alleviate the power budget of is the projectile dodgeable? Is the person doing it able to be... do they give their position away? Can they be countered in some way while they're doing it? Are they left exposed while they're doing it? Et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of different ways to balance around it.
I think a good example of this is Trickster, because Trickster has a high ammo count, but as compensation, he needs to land enough blades in order to get the damage state. But Behavior realized, oh, poop. We designed a game that's covered with terrain, and this character has to land 8 knives. Quick, increase the move speed. Make him feel clunky.
Well, they
That'll
also
throw a bit. Phew!
Trickster also has drop off,
I don't know.
which is it's funny because when I think about like Trickster versus Huntress, I'm like, why doesn't Huntress have drop off? Like she does, but it's like it's like ungodly far.
It's because of their arms. Have you not seen? Huntress is built like a brick house. Trickster is built like a twig. What's he going to throw with those arms? The knives are literally his weights. That's what he weight trains with.
It's so strange that, like I said, like the one who has to hit you a bunch of times is the one with drop off. That is so odd to me.
Yeah, no, Trickster is an enigma like Skull Merchant, but in the case of the drone scan lines, that change, in conjunction with the drones constantly being in scouting mode, I don't know why they labeled it as active mode. That's not the name, it's scouting. So it ends up deleting a playstyle on Skull Merchant, which was a rather niche playstyle. So when you entered a game, there were 2 different Skull Merchant playstyles that you would encounter. The majority one that you would see would be the Chase Merchant. This was the Skull Merchant who played by placing a drone at a loop and just saying, yeah, you want to loop at this loop? Tough. Go next. But there was one Skull Merchant playstyle which was very niche. This was a playstyle I personally like to enjoy. And this is a playstyle that I feel like you have to mix together with the Chase Merchant. And this was Trap Merchant. This is a Skull Merchant that's more akin to the days of long old trap killers like Heg and Trapper, where you would place your traps in locations you know survivors would go in order to build up the lock-on. So a good trap example that I like to use is, you know, the hall or the entryway to the window loop on RPD. I believe it's the which room was it?
I know the open area where the hook always spawns right next to the there's a pallet there.
So let's say we're in the middle of the map. We're facing the statue. On your right-hand side, that loop with the window and the pallet inside.
Oh, yeah.
Where sometimes the pallet can spawn as something else. Yeah. Anyways, so there is a entryway, and just behind that entryway is a wall. You would place a drone in that area, and survivors would run through that entryway almost all the time, because that is the best way to get to the loop at that window, or to get to the interview room. But because there's a trap there, and they don't see it because it's in stealth mode, they get tagged. And it feels like a proper reward for a trap placement. But with these 2 changes, it has been completely executed. You can't play Trap Merchant anymore. Because now, the drone lines are completely visible. So the drones are faster, technically. They're 85 degrees a second, because that's how scouting mode is. But it's one scan line. There's no point in setting up trap drones, because it's just a singular scan line. It's going to fetch you like 1 value out of every 500 games. Because it's just spinning at 85 degrees a second. And people don't realize this. It is slow for one scan line to cover an entire area, even at 85 degrees. So the trap playstyle is completely dead. The only playstyle you can now play is just Antiloop. So plop your drone at a loop, and even that one is terrible because of the hinder nerf. So we have a character who's one niche playstyle that you could combine in conjunction with the Antiloop. That's been deleted from the game. We have a bit of complexity with the stealth drones, where you could have realistically said the stealth drones were complex because it rewarded more trap placement or like a trap methodology. Now off the table. It's non-existent. And now the anti-loop parts that they want is worse too, because the haste is gone, the hinder is nerfed. There's nothing else to do with the claw traps outside of dealing a damage state. But like 50 other killers can get a damage state instantly. They don't have to play a trigonometry questionnaire to get the scan line on them. A Huntress just picks up hatchet, boom, done. Clown throws bottle, boom, done.
You also mentioned it with the whole trap playstyle, because Now that the trap playstyle is gone, because she was the first trap killer we've had since
since
Hag.
Hag. Yep.
Um,
Like, there's no other trap killers in the game. We have Trapper, who was the first killer in the game. Then
mhm,
we got Hag, who was like in 2017, I think.
mhm.
It was like late 2016, early 2017, I think.
But
And people, or maybe it's a little earlier or later. I don't remember
but the thing with Skull Merchant is she was the only trap killer who could like kind of also be an anti-loop.
exactly. Like
Um,
in the case of Trapper and Hag, they did technically have anti-loop because you just plop a Trapper trap at a pallet. Now they can't loop there. But the problem is set time, because Trapper had to have a trap in hand and he needed the time to set it up. Same with Hag, she needed to set it up.
mhm.
Skull Merchant is different because she's able to recall the drones from anywhere across the map with her funny little iPhone Galaxy 18, and she's able to just throw the trap into the air and go like, "Okay, your time to shine, buddy. You are doing amazing." Which unironically has led to one of Pixel's favorite playstyles, which is laser tagging.
Mhm.
But it's a bit of a wholesome thing to appear from a rather grim situation, because I feel like Skull Merchant's power budget was put too much in the anti-loop rather than the trap identity.
Yeah.
And there is technically one trap killer in the game, which is Freddy, but Freddy is an anomaly. We don't know what he is.
I didn't even think about Freddy. And someone did mention in chat, Bowling God, artist is trap adjacent. She's a weird one because it's technically not a trap.
If we are talking about PTB artist, then I would classify it as like a pseudo trap archetype killer.
Mm-hmm.
But with live artists, that is not the case. I do not see her as a trap killer. So, and then there's the poor excuse of drone scan lines are now invisible beyond 16 meters. Do you not see the giant skull flying in the air? Because in the case of Trapper and Hag, they have one excuse. They draw the thing on the floor. People now have to look at the floor. They see a shiny little metal thing on the floor, they know to keep away from it. They see a pile of mud where a pile of mud is not supposed to be there, they keep away from it. But it's hard to see, because in the case of Trapper, if he gets a map where there's foliage, it becomes a lot harder to detect the trap. But then again, this is Dead by Daylight 2024. There isn't a single blade of grass. They don't want to remind the Dead by Daylight players real life. Get out of here.
So
that's not existent.
So the thing with trap killers, and this goes for every video game with trap characters, trap characters have an inherent problem. And ironically, Skull Merchant fixed that problem. The inherent problem with most trap killers is that for a trap character to work, someone has to make a mistake. By the definition of what a trap is.
There is a good definition of it. It's called Feast or Famine.
Mm-hmm.
This is where a character, in rare instances, can either extremely hyper carry the game, or they completely fall over flat. Because Trapper and Hag are very Feast or Famine designed.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the case of Trapper, he just needs one good trap, and all of a sudden the survivor team falls apart. However, it is if he gets that one good trap. If he never gets that, he's just going to be Machete Man. That's all he has. Same with Hag, but in the case of Hag, it's even worse because she's slow.
Yeah, Skull Merchant though they were able
Skull
to
Merchant is different.
They were able to add a few things. The intel is part of it, but also the way the drones get taken down was more slowdown than Hag and Trapper had. She doesn't have to get her traps back. She has more control over them, unlike Hag. It's one of Hag's biggest problems, in my opinion. Is while you can set a new trap and it gets rid of the oldest one, that's way less control than Skull Merchant has. She can literally get rid of whichever drone she needs to. And then place it where she needs to as well. The fact that you can set them up in a loop as actual anti-loop and not just necessarily a trap was also something that the other two kind of have, but not really. Especially because of the time investment. Because Hag does it, because, okay, Hag always has her traps on her. But if she puts a trap at a loop, even if she has setting speed add-ons, you have enough time to leave.
Yeah, because she still has to draw the thing on the floor. She still has to crouch down in order to draw it. Trapper has to crouch down, still set up the trap. Skull Merchant still keeps moving at base speed when she plops the drone in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And the drone pretty much starts on spawn. Like, the moment that it goes out of her hands, starts spinning. That's how it works.
But
like, the setup speed on Skull Merchant is one of the best things about her when it comes to setup time, because it allows her to be a much more efficient trap killer. But at the same time, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because now it leads into the more anti-loop annoyance factor that she currently is suffering from.
And the thing with this, as far as what the devs are trying to do here, because for those who don't know, in was it the forums? I think it was the forums. Someone was asking about this, and the devs straight up said that they are doing this until they can do the rework to help alleviate annoyance of the character. They didn't say those words exactly, but they basically implied it with this little dev note down here. Very difficult to play around accordingly is the way to word it.
So I would understand if they made changes to try and repair the relationship she has with the community, because Skull Merchant as a character has been notoriously infamous since launch.
Mm-hmm.
People did not like her visuals, people did not like the gameplay, and the reputation she has garnered over the years with the 3-gen meta and her current anti-loop and haste manipulation and everything there has just built up into a giant ball of hatred towards the character. But with the changes that they provided, it's a very sideways skew approach to fixing it. Because if you want to update a character and say, alright, this character is annoying, people don't like playing as them, you would consider, let's reduce the annoyance factor. They didn't do that. Because... Hold on, I wrote it down here somewhere.
If anything, they made the annoyance factor worse.
Yeah, so here we go. I'm going to say word for word what I wrote down for this interview. It is clear that the nerfs were designed to reduce Skull Merchant's annoyance factors, to allow behavior time to prepare for the rework, and to allow players to take a chill pill. But the changes were performed extremely poorly. They only solved the mobility problems that players had with Skull Merchant, by first slowing them and running at Mach 10, but all of her other problems that people have are still intact. Mm-hmm. She still has the undetectable from drone deployment, which has recently become a very big annoyance. Because unlike a character like Myers, who is technically a stealth snowball killer, he still has very loud breathing. You can hear him. Unlike Ghostface, whose entire gimmick is that he becomes undetectable, you can still hear the tassels on his arms. Skull Merchant rarely made noise. Like, the only thing you could hear was, like, her footstep audio. But even that was reduced with the initial PTB patch. Like, they pushed very hard for Skull Merchant's stealth play, and that has led to a lot of people being annoyed with that. We also still have the lock-on stacks, which are still permanent. One of the big problems players have is the fact that it is a permanent status effect that just lingers on their head. And granted, I'm not going to bring Ghostface up, because clearly I'm talking out of my butt with this. Like, why are you bringing up another killer who applies a status effect that can hide on your head till the very end of the match when they built it up from the start of the match? Make it make sense! This character's clearly garbage. Ghostface is pure and there's nothing wrong with him. Anyways, in the case of Skull Merchant, the lock-on stacks just very much lingered on a person's head. And that was their point of annoyance. And then, of course, we have the current nerfs, where it's enforcing that Skull Merchant plays gen defense, similar to Freddy. Because one of the reasons I personally really like Skull Merchant is that she has a lot of build variety. So you read through the add-ons, right?
Yeah.
So I personally liked running Geographical Readout for vaulting builds, for demolition builds. I like Prototype Router and Low Power Mode for the goofy Wendy's Merchant build. I liked even haste manipulation builds with looted and play with your food, just to turn Skull Merchant into a NASCAR. It was fun. It was one of the big reasons why I like Skull Merchant. It's because of that built-in flexibility, that she's able to pretty much play in any way that she wants. But because of these nerfs, because the trap playstyle has been removed, and because of all this power that Skull Merchant used to have, which allowed her the freedom to have expression of build diversity being brought down, she now has to play gen defense in order to exist in the game. It's similar to Trapper in a sense, where Trapper needs corrupt intervention to function. Skull Merchant technically did not need corrupt intervention unless you wanted to lean more heavily into the trap playstyle. But now you need corrupt intervention just to set up drones in loops. And even when you try to anti-loop, what do you have? You don't have the haste anymore. The hinder you have has been nerfed. It's non-existent. This character is, in my opinion, leaning very heavily into the 3-gen direction again, which is something that we've been trying to push her away from since day one. And now all of a sudden behavior like, nah, back to 3-gen merchant with you for like 6 or 7 months. We're going to rework you again.
I think another problem with it, and based on everything you just said, is she's a trap killer with haste and slowdown, with an anti-loop ability, or with a possible anti-loop ability, with undetectable. And she has intel. The only thing missing from nope, never mind. No, she has inherent slowdown because it takes a minute to get the drones out.
Yep. Like, in the case of Skull Merchant, it was very clear with this rework, they leaned very heavy into a jack-of-all-trades direction. And we have seen jack-of-all-trades killers like Vecna and Dracula recently. But in the case of Skull Merchant, it's a inherent jack-of-all-trades route, where it's not the intended goal, it's more so something they just raised up from Skull Merchant 2.0, because they had no idea what they were doing. It was a very heavy damage control patch where they were trying to put more counterplay into the character's kit, but it accidentally added a lot more interest in the character through build diversity, because you had so many tools in your hands that you could just go like, well, I can lean into any of these and I can have fun. But because we've removed a few of them, and because some others have been nerfed, it's now forcing her into the playstyle that people have hated on her.
I think,
and now
I was just gonna say, I think the thing with all of this though is that I don't know what direction they want Skull Merchant to go in.
And
that's like, my problem, because it's like, okay, do you want her to be a stealth killer? Do you want her to be a stealthy trap killer? Do you want her to be a stealthy anti-loop killer? Do you want her to be an anti-loop trap killer? Do you want her to be an information trap killer? Like, for the most part, most good designed or very well designed characters in games have 2 general archetypes they take and combine them in some way.
Yep.
And then you have your baselines. Trapper would be like the baseline trap killer, and then Hag would be the improvement. She's the non-chasing trap killer.
She's more of a pseudo-aggressive defense trapper, where she's able to protect a area, but a lot more better than Trapper because of her mobility.
Right.
But in the case of Skull Merchant, you're right. Like, it's like they threw in a hot pot of different ideas, just trying to see what will work with this character, what will be more enjoyable. But it ends up blending into a confusing mess, where we have a character who has so much, but no one knows what's going on.
And before someone brings up Vecna is the jack of all trades, but that is his design goal. It's very clear that's what he is the first utility killer in the game, in my opinion.
Yep.
Even Flight of the Damned, as some will argue this, Flight of the Damned isn't intended to damage. The reason why I say that is because of how easy it is to dodge and crouch. For the most part. It's intended to be a zoning tool. So he is full on a utility killer. He's an M1 killer with tools to help him M1. That is his design philosophy. Same with like Dracula. Dracula is a little harder, but it's kind of the same thing, except for they wanted to make him a weaker version of... They wanted to try and make him a weaker version of a bunch of other killers combined into one.
And it has not led into a very good situation for them, since only 2 of their modes are functional.
Well, don't get me wrong. Like he can still be nerfed. I'm just saying, like I understand the vision, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, like I understand the vision too. I just don't like the direction the vision is taking at the moment.
But Skull Merchant, I don't know what they're trying to do with her.
Yeah. And this goes into another discussion topic I wanted to mention, and that is, why did behavior decide to go into this direction of just hyper nerfing Skull Merchant? Because I understand it, I get it. However, I'm going to bring up a caveat. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let me spill the tea for you, as the hip kids would say. So we have had this new version of Skull Merchant for about a year now.
Mm-hmm.
And we have heard all the complaints about this new version of Skull Merchant. Some people prefer the counterplay options. Some people have some problems with the rotation speeds. People have problems with undetectable, etc., etc. We've heard all of these complaints. However, you would expect when people complain about numbers or complain about elements about the character's kit, behavior would adjust those numbers. So, I decided to take a quick look on the Dead by Daylight wiki, just to make sure. So if you were to look at Skull Merchant's patch of life, or the lifespan of her balance patch, she has gone a lot of changes. However, all of those changes are for Skull Merchant 1.0.
Mm-hmm.
She has received 2 changes with Skull Merchant 2.0, and both of them are quality of life alterations. The first one was changing the scanline to turn white when a survivor is unable to be detected.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one, I believe, had to do with the rotation system. But I don't like thinking about the rotation system. It's so undercooked.
Well,
but
yeah, there's not a single add-on for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why do we have shotgun speakers and Adi Valente, which match like an impossible skill check doctor, but we don't have a single add-on for... Actually, no, I have my answer for you why. It's because it wasn't on the PTB for Skull Merchant.
Yeah.
The rotation system was a fan-created concept from Skull Merchant mains, who liked the rotation system. They asked for it to be buffed, but they also asked for one more element, and that was the idea that you could change the drone rotating, going like... to...
Yeah.
And behavior were like, that is brilliant, throw it in! But the problem is they didn't have time to test it. And because of this, the rotation system was thrown in, but still very undercooked. You can tell this thing was just a last-minute thought. Because there's no animation for the drone changing. There's no animation for Skull Merchant with her radar. Like, there isn't even a button press from any of her fingers. You just hold the radar up, and she uses her mind to just change the rotation of the drone. She's just like, you will now turn counterclockwise across the planet!
It's the back of the phone. It's like a touchpad.
Oh, exactly. That's what's going on. She just tickles the back of the phone with her ring finger.
But, like, we talked about this a little bit beforehand, and I'm going to bring it up now. For those who don't know, League of Legends had a character.
Oh, we are talking about him now already?
So League of Legends had a character named YORO, named after Yorick Mori from, is it Macbeth or Hamlet? It's Hamlet, right? It's Hamlet, right? I'm cultured.
Don't bother asking me. I only know Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, ye Yorick, to be or not to be. That's whatever. Anyways, the point is...
That's Shakespeare. I don't like him.
The point is, Yorick was a necromancer character back in League's early days. And the way his abilities worked were he would summon ghouls to do to attack people, and they would give him buffs and things like this. However, Yorick was so badly designed because he was either insanely good or completely, for lack of a better word, dog shit. He was just bad. He was either really good or really bad. There was no in between. So Riot at the time was starting to rework characters. For Yorick and Poppy also, they did this to Poppy too. Someone reminded me of that. I forgot. These characters were so badly designed that Riot nerfed them into the ground until their reworks happened. Their reworks took about 3 years for both of them. And to be fair to Riot, the reworks were very good. Poppy's in particular. Yorick's has some issues, but Poppy's rework is great. They both kept the identities of the characters mostly, and were able to sustain the player base of the characters prior to what little was there. But not
Yeah.
only did they nerf these characters into the ground, they scrubbed their existence. They weren't in the free rotations anymore, which was something they did for all their characters so people could try characters out. They were never mentioned whenever they were brought up in interviews or anything like that. They were never shown in any trailers, unlike most of the other characters. They were never given cinematics or even in promotional material. They were completely gone. There was someone I remember someone showed me this. There was a promotional material showing off all the characters. Yorick and Poppy were not in that image. Riot tried their best to scrub these characters out of existence until the reworks happened. And that is what I feel they're doing here. I don't even feel. We know that's what they're doing here. They admitted it.
Yeah. I will say, so you gave me a video to watch. I watched this a couple of years ago, so it was a little bit hazy in my mind. I knew the general tidbits that were mentioned, but when I watched the video again, and I was just listening through, I'm just like, man, this feels like Skull Merchant in a different universe. This just feels like a Skull Merchant in League of Legends who went through the exact same nonsense, and we are living it 1-to-1. But I will say there's one big difference in that video with Skull Merchant and Yorick.
What is that?
I feel like the timeline for both of them are a little bit different. I feel like that Skull Merchant 1.0 and Yorick 1.0 were very close together in timeline difference. Then they hop at the same time with the rework. But unlike Yorick, where they went with the kit that they did create and were like, okay, we'll try and or they did give the massive nerfs to the ghouls, which was just mind-numbingly stupid because bad players don't know how to counteract the ghouls, but good players know how to play against ghouls, so we're nerfing ghouls for bad players. Duh. But in the case of afterwards, they have been a bit more lenient with giving just a few more adjustments to Yorick, trying to push him more into different ideas of what they want to try with this kit. And I feel like people have wanted a Aurelian Soul type of rework where they keep the model and the lore, but they update the gameplay a bit. I feel like Skull Merchant is in the zone where that scrubbing, or she is in the moment when the ghouls got nerfed.
So, another character I wanted to bring up, and I actually just thought about this. I think Atrox is another kind of example of what's... Well, no, here's the thing. Because Riot, and I bring up League all the time for those listening, I bring up League all the time because they have been doing this for almost 15 years now. They have gone through the ups and downs. They've learned most of the lessons. They know what they're doing as much as people like to say they don't. And I think...
What do you mean, though? Have you not seen Aphelios?
Fun fact
200 years of collective design, by the way.
Fun fact about
I know about the fun fact you're about to mention.
Yeah.
It's about the moon affecting his stats.
Yes.
Listen, I'm a League of Legends player. I know exactly all the dumb stuff that you are about to mention.
That is such a fucking insane thing.
Yes, but the character is... when you play the character and the full moon is in effect in real life, his stats are inflated by 5,000%. But when there's a new moon, minus 200. The character is completely dead. And he has 25 different guns with different abilities. Yes! That sounds like a brilliant idea. And then you remember it's, is it Magnificent T? Is that the guy's name?
No, you're thinking Certainly T?
Certainly T, that's the guy. When you realize that's the guy who's making Aphelios, you're like, oh yeah, no, I get it now. That explains why this character initially sounded giga cracked.
You know, it's really funny. Certainly T is the guy who made, you know how there's so many 3-hit passives in League of Legends? He's the reason why, because a lot of his characters have them. I just realized Skull Merchant has a 3-hit passive.
Oh no! Did they hire Certainly T that day? That might explain why Skull Merchant has such a visually distinct kit compared to everyone else.
So, what I was going to bring up with Atrox, though, is that my point was when they knew they were going to rework Atrox, they learned their lesson from Yorick and Poppy. Rather than killing the character, they gave Atrox a mini rework that was so good... The player base actually liked that when he did get his rework, his actual one, people were mad.
Oh, I remember that. Like, I was there in like my high school days in like the hallway during lunch. I'm busy eating, watching my phone, chilling, and then I see the Atrox rework dropped. I'm like, didn't he get a mini rework? Weren't
Like,
people happy with that? And then
it's
I just started reading the comments, and so many people were yelling, "This is just Riven 2.0, but slower. This character is not what we wanted." And
but my point with that is like I would rather them go in that direction. And they
yeah,
tried. It looks like they did try with Skull Merchant 2.0, but they haven't done anything since then to
yeah,
adjust her. And this
like
and the
you're
adjustment
right.
they're doing now, as many people have pointed out, is literally putting her in a grave until they can resurrect her.
Yeah,
Which
like
I just
with this rework, like in my opinion, if they tried to change this character, like if they went through like change after change, going like, oh, we're going to move the undetectable to recalling non-hacked drones, or we're going to change the lock-on to passively dissipate over time. Like if they did try different changes and nothing worked, then this approach would have been perfectly fine. Everyone would have universally agreed this was an okay solution just to try and get her under control. The problem is they haven't done anything. It's been a year of this character in 2.0, and they've done 2 changes, and they were quality of life adjustments to make her easier to understand.
if all they did in this patch was the hinder and haste thing, and that still didn't work, and then in like a couple patches, then they did the other stuff.
Mm.
I don't think the reaction from everyone would be as bad as it is right now.
Oh, obviously not. Like, I
Um,
feel like the hindered and the removal of haste was something that everyone was clamoring on about for like years on end. They wanted these gone and hindered to be nerfed. And I agree. Like I mentioned earlier on, that I think that these are great changes. It allows the character budget to pretty much be removed away from Antiloop and to be pushed more into other directions. But the problem is the other nerfs try very hard to remove the parts of Skull Merchant that people like about playing as and against her, and
mm.
it pushes more into the annoyance that people hate.
It's
Because now people have to play more stealthily with deploying drones in loops. So now she's forced into the anti-loop even though she's not good at it, and she has to play gen defense,
it,
which is what people don't want.
it's funny because someone in chat, Twitch is being dumb and I can't see your name. I think it's Yori. She's a perfect example that devs make choices on forums and community and not design choices. The thing with that though is I don't even think that's what happened here.
Mm,
I think it is, but I think they took the wrong. They took the idea that everyone hated the character and didn't know why.
yeah, like if you listen to the lower MMR, they cry about everything. Like I've seen people cry about Trapper and say that he's a secret tier 0. But in the case of like higher MMR, when you crawl up, you start to see that players get a bit more of a better understanding on Skull Merchant. You start to see, hey, this character is not actually that bad, because people thought that Skull Merchant in lower MMR, they thought that she was like this secret hidden OP killer that could get 5 kills in 2 nanoseconds and just climb up the ranks. But when you get to higher MMR, Zubat, I heard from him personally, or not like personally, but in his streams, he constantly says, listen, the character is annoying, but she is beyond not that bad to play against. Like, there are killers in the game who are maliciously worse than Skull Merchant. Like, Clown has way more control on haste and hinder manipulation. Myers is still in the game with Tombstone. Like, there
The
are just killers in the game who have a lot more annoyance and are a lot more malicious.
the
But
thing
Skull Merchant in particular is just a low MMR pub stomper that makes people cry about her.
the thing I also bring up with Skull Merchant that most people don't even mention for some reason, she can't down you with her power.
Yep.
She has to M1 you. That's why, and don't get me wrong, I'm glad it's gone, but that's why she had the haste and the hinder in the first place.
Yep.
It's because
Like,
at the end of the day, she has to M1 you to down you. I think just like Legion.
mm,
The difference is Legion can get those injuries constantly and basically force you into the injury state the whole match. I'm not saying Legion's good. I'm just saying from a design philosophy, that's why he's able to do that and not have the extra haste and such for the most part. But Skull Merchant, because she couldn't down you with her power directly, she was given the undetectable, the haste, and the hinder. Once again, I think it was too much, but that's why they gave her all that. It was to compensate for the fact that she still is an M1 downing killer.
Like, in the case of Skull Merchant, I'm going to compare Clown one more time. So here's a very interesting decision, or an interesting thing to ponder about. So, when you play as Vecna, just ponder the orb for a moment when you think about me, and think about what I'm about to say. In the case of Clown, you have no control about what's going to happen. He will either slow you down with the purple bottle spam, or he's going to hinder or haste boost himself, or he's going to do both. Skull Merchant, you have the choice in what happens. Because the claw traps have like 50,000 different ways in order to be counteracted. You can crouch under the drone to avoid being detected. You can hack the drone pre-chase. You can stand still to avoid being detected. You can use terrain to avoid being detected. Even when you are claw trapped, you can crouch the drone to avoid the hinder penalty. Like, she has like 50 different ways to counteract her. No wonder she's a C-tier killer. She gives you the say in what you want. She's like, oh, do you want to be claw trapped now? Or do you want to be claw trapped a little later? Would you like the M1 instead? That's literally how Skull Merchant plays. But people are too dumb to realize that's how it goes. It's like Plague. Plague has, like in the case of Plague, it's very much a situation of how can I avoid getting hit? That's how you play every other killer. But in the case of Plague and Skull Merchant, it is how long can I prevent until I get hit? Because in the case of Plague, you know you're going to get broken and lose a health state because you're infected. The question is, how long can you delay that process? How many times can you dodge the puke? How many times can you get in her face to avoid, or just like FOV tech her? In the case of Skull Merchant, it's the exact same thing. How many times can I avoid getting tagged? And how can I force the claw trap to appear on me in a situation that fits me more? But in the case of Clown, you don't get the choice of matter. He throws bottle at you, you're perma-slowed, you get hit. XD, go next.
I'm trying to find it. There was a meme about this.
Alright, and I'm going to say one more thing. Let's talk about these changes and what they mean when it comes to the feelings towards Skull Merchant 3.0 now, and other killers. So, I wrote this down, and it looks like a lot of people are raising this concern too. I don't think this is something that will happen, but it's something that is worthy of worrying about. And that is that if the casual audience were able to constantly flame this character and lead her stats to be inflated to a 70% kill rate, what's not stopping them from doing the same thing to other niche audiences?
They can do that
because
we're seeing it now.
Yeah, Trickster is a good example of this, because with the Trickster rework, the Trickster rework is the biggest enigma, because I read the dev notes about what they wanted to do, and I think to myself, the guy who wrote the dev notes for the Trickster rework obviously was not the same guy who did the Trickster rework. Because the guy who wrote the dev notes clearly knew what was wrong with Trickster. But then they list the patch notes, so it's like, I'm sorry, what? They complain about the lack of counterplay, and then the dev team are like, oh, alright, he's now 115 base. He now has 8 knives that he has to throw at you, but he now gets main event every 6 knives! Let's go!
I found the meme, by the way. It's I fucking hate how she can just leave her power on the gens and force you to be afflicted by it with no counterplay other than just tanking it. I fucking hate how if you get hit with her power enough, she gives you fucking broken and you basically can't hide from her. May as well have no-ed before the gens are even done. I fucking hate how once you're forced to suffer, or how once you're forced to suffer it, she just gets even more powerful in chase, and looping is nigh impossible. The picture is Skull Merchant, but they're talking about Plague.
Yeah, no, like, There are so many characters that we do these and complain about genuine criticisms, but everyone just constantly looks at Skull Merchant and they're like, "Oh, I loathe you."
Like,
But yeah, like this is the big worry. If they're able to inflate Skull Merchant's kill rate, and they now see, oh, the dev team are now seeing that her kill rate is 70%. People hate her. We are soft deleting her to the Shadow Realm, and now they're thinking to themselves, I really don't like Clown. Trickster has been annoying me today. Like, that's the big threat. I don't think it's going to happen instantly, because in the case of Skull Merchant, it was a long time of building up with the reputation. But if we see like people getting annoyed with a certain killer, if we see mainstream content creators making negative content, because this is another big thing about Skull Merchant, you never see any positive Skull Merchant content on YouTube anywhere. Like, there might be a few, but they're from like very niche audiences of Skull Merchant players who know about the character, who understand, hey, this character is actually kind of garbage. But in the case of like mainstream audiences, like, I still believe Otstarva's video on the chess merchant and Hens's video is still one of their popular ones. Like, every single time I load in to watch any of their videos, I see that crop up and I'm just like, it's been a year, guys. It's dead. And people still argue about chess merchant. And it's like, it's been a year. It's long gone. Just let it die, please.
so I played Chucky. People still complain about manual scamper.
Oh, I remember the days of good old Scamper Brain Chucky.
But
I'm glad it's gone.
People still complain about it.
Like, I understood crying about it back when it used to be a big problem, but now it's not existent anymore. The only time you can scamper is in power. Well, there's no reason to cry.
Some people, no, a lot of people, because I see it in my comment sections all the time, a lot of people still think he can manual scamper.
Okay, then they just can't read.
So I brought up Nightlight stats. Now, before someone says anything, yes, Nightlight is self-reported. However, that leads me to my actual point with this. Because Nightlight is self-reported, that means that more than likely the people on here are at least semi-decent at the game. Skull Merchant on Nightlight has a 1.69% play rate with a 67, I'm just rounding up, a 67% kill rate.
Yeah, and if I recall, Behavior said they want the base kill statistic to be 60%.
Yeah, around that.
Yeah, yes. Like around it. Like, they're fine if it's like a 61 or a 62, but when it starts to grow a little bit higher, then they begin to get a little worried. Like what happened with Hillbilly. I think he had like a kill statistic of like 65.
He is at 59.33.
Okay, people are just bad at the character then. My mistake.
Well, here's the thing with it, though. I forget what is it. Legion? Yeah, Legion's one of those weird characters too, because Legion's at 53%. The more interesting thing with like Legion is the kill distribution. He has a 30% chance of getting a 4K and a 22% chance of getting no kills. And then the other ones are like 18, 11, and 18. So statistically speaking, he either gets 4 kills or no kills. There's some other killers like that, and what is Skull Merchant's? Because her distribution is really weird too. Yeah, she has a 43% chance of getting a 4K and an 11% chance of getting no kills. That has to be DC's.
Yeah, like the fact that the developers have like her kill rate at 70%, it tells me that these aren't DCs. It's people killing themselves on hook.
That's what I meant. Killing themselves. Yeah.
Because if I remember, the devs don't like counting disconnects. But I can definitely tell you, if they did, she would easily have like a 90% kill rate then. Because Skull Merchant is the one killer in the game that I genuinely think struggles to even pass a 1 or 2k. But because of how the players react when they see the character, when they see the UI, when they hear the bongo drums going ham, they immediately decide, the hook is looking rather curious today.
I
I
mean,
might decide to lounge with it for a moment or two.
I mean, Nurse is in a similar boat. I mean, she's got a
Yeah.
38% 4K chance, but with a 60% kill rate. But I legitimately think that it's just Nurse being Nurse.
Yeah, and if I remember, historically, Nurse has always had a low kill rate, mostly
Mhm.
because new players don't know how to play as her. And that is the biggest enigma I can never get. How do you not know how to play as Nurse? She is easier than Wraith.
Um,
You blink, you hit the guy. It's that simple.
but like, I can't think of another killer that like people DC enough, not DC, but give up on Hook enough for me to like cross that with another killer.
Yeah, like, the only other killer I could technically think of is, like, twins, but they're more so bleeding out on the floor.
Yeah, and like, I mean, Chucky maybe, but even then, I know people complain about DCs. I don't really get them that often, to be fair.
Yeah.
Or people
And
giving up.
so I make the joke when it comes to Skull Merchant games. I either get Custom Mode Plus, where everyone disconnects and I just get Custom Mode but I get blood points.
Mhm.
And the other game is a coin flip, where I will either get a game where there are people who are willing to play, learn the character, and actually try, or I get a game where I have like one or two people attempting to try, but the moment one of the other two, who tend to be Neo or Ada mains now that I think about it, get on the floor and they get on hook, they start unhooking themselves. I'm like, oh, it's that kind of game again now, is it?
You know,
All right.
looking this over, I think Skull Merchant's closest parallel is actually Sadako.
Yeah, like Sadako is another awkward situation because her rework has been. I'm trying to think. Her rework has been like a year or two ago now.
Hmm.
Like, in the case of Sadako, it's more so people just don't know what she does anymore. The character got reworked like 3 different times, and she's never had a time to really settle. So people didn't have enough time to learn her. But in the case of Skull Merchant, she got reworked, and we've been left with a year to learn. And people are learning how to play against her. The fact that that kill statistic is a little bit lower than 70 is telling me, hey, there are people in higher MMR who are smart enough to know this character's actually garbage, and she can be counteracted very easily.
Hmm.
But the big worry, back to like the fact that her kill statistics were so high and so many people cried about her, I worry that other killers could have the chance of repeating this situation.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have been crying about this now, where they're saying, oh, they're going to delete Clown from the game now because people cry about him, and the player base will cry about him. But, like, it's not a perfect one-to-one. It's not going to easily happen where it's like, oh, because Skull Merchant died because of people crying about it, immediately someone like Xenomorph is going to suffer the same fate. This is more so going to be a slow burn, but it's a seed that's been planted into the player base's mindset for the casual audience. They have now learned from behavior themselves that if they don't like a character just enough, they are willing to soft delete the character. And
I'm gonna bring up League again.
yeah, like
um,
in the case of Trickster is a good example. When they
mhm.
got reworked, everyone hated it. Trickster mains despised it because Trickster mains are always on a debate, which is better, 6, 8, or 6 knives or 8 knives. Because the 6 knife Tricksters like the more slower, methodical approach where you tap fire, but the people who like the 8 knives more prefer the spray and pray playstyle. And the developers, instead of leaning into a rework that allows the spray and pray people to be happy, but gives like a old Death Throes compilation base to Trickster, they just decided, nah, we're going to delete one player base's side out of the table. We're going to lean into spray and pray because that's what we wanted initially. And now the people who have adapted what we have picked up from Trickster, yeah, no, they can suck a lemon.
Well, something, and
And because of
I do think.
sorry, I just want to mention one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
And because of how many people cried about the Trickster rework, they didn't revert it. Instead, they decided to nerf it. So we went from a rework that was trying to fix the problems about Trickster, that ended up exacerbating the big problems about Trickster, into the state that he is in now, where a lot of Trickster players are unsatisfied because he's just clunky. He's slow. And people hate the 115 move speed because it removes the counterplay they had before, which was maintaining distance. And people want to throw knives as the guy. They don't want to run around as a stick figure with a highlighted bat and just swing it. They want to throw knives at people. And that's
Yeah,
it.
I think what I was gonna say was I lost my train of thought. The other thing, and people can complain about this. I think Trickster is a good example of not Trickster. I'm going to bring up Unknown. We're going to get back to Trickster in a second because I think
Yeah.
he more proves the point too. The change they did to Unknown about the edge tech, when you could basically
Defusing the edge
you could
tech.
stop your husks from spawning,
Yeah.
with basically no penalty. Now, the thing, I actually agreed with this change. I don't know if you listened to my patch notes read originally, but I agree with this change, for the reason the devs didn't state, but I have a feeling it's the real reason. And it's something that I think that Skull Merchant and Trickster are going to suffer from, that we've kind of been alluding to the entire time. The devs do have an idea on what they want these killers to be and do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for Unknown in particular, they don't want people to have control of where the husks spawn.
Yeah.
Because that's part of Unknown's design philosophy and power budget. They even said it in the dev notes, like when Unknown was released. They were okay making his teleport as powerful as it was because you didn't have much control over where the husks spawned.
Exactly.
That was part of what they wanted to do. But with Trickster and Skull Merchant, I don't know what they want.
I think this is a bit of a clash when it comes to character identity versus gameplay. Because I thought about Trickster and I read the lore for the character. It is very clear they came out with the idea, what if we made a sadistic character who likes to inflict pain onto others? Because that is the whole gimmick of Trickster. He could be as fast as someone like Huntress at mowing people down, but that's not the goal. The goal is he wants to hear people in pain and scream, so he can record the audio for his music, and so that way he feels good. Because that's the kind of character that he is. And instead of leaning in, Blight is in a similar situation where it's like, oh, he is an alchemist who's been trying to escape the realm, who has been using different compounds to try and do everything, and it shifts his body into this hulking mass. Meanwhile, gameplay, he's a pinball.
Right.
In the case of Trickster, I feel like the developers should have leaned into the player base's thought process and thought to themselves, people like this current iteration of Trickster, we should try and push more for what people like. But instead, they decided, nah, we want to push more for the artistic flow, and that's going to harm our player base, but we don't care about that player base because that player base is like 1%.
I think a good example of one they did correctly, which is ironic because the player base is just as small, is Knight, actually.
Yeah.
The dev design for Knight, and people can argue with me, I cannot know the exact design. I could just use the tool, the context we're given. But based on everything that Knight has gone through, the devs want Knight to be a split pressure killer. They want a guard to be chasing someone and you to be chasing someone else. That is what they want. And the rework has even kind of shown that that's what they want. He wasn't that for the longest time, but they managed to make him that with the most recent changes. Global cooldown aside, but that's a whole other discussion because they got rid of it at your feedback. But the thing is, like, the devs do have, like I said, the devs have designs for these killers, what they want. The problem with Trickster and more particularly Skull Merchant, even I can't figure out what they want her to be.
Like, it's more.
We talked about it
Oh,
earlier.
sorry.
We talked about it earlier. It's like, do they want her to be stealthy? Do they want her to be a trap killer? Do they want her to be Antiloop? Do they want her to be intel? You can't have her be everything. And like I said, with Vecna, it's like he's an M1 with all of these things, but everything he does facilitates the M1. With Skull Merchant, it's like, well, she just kind of has that. Like, what is the point of the undetectable in Skull Merchant?
Like, the best way I can describe it is there was a meme that I saw, and the meme was a police officer talks to a guy in a car, and she says to him, "Sir, what drugs are you on?" And the driver's response is, "Yes." That is Skull Merchant. She does not know what she wants to be. She just has everything. But at the same time, she has nothing because it was all so awkward. I believe the big reason they went in this direction is because they wanted to lean into the name of the chapter, which is Tools of Torment. My idea of what they wanted to do with her is they wanted her to be this type of killer that is similar in a sense to like Saw or Hostel, where she has like different tools to experiment with, to play with a person through harming them in different ways. And we can see it with her weapon animations too, because all of her different weapons have different weapon like blade wipe animations. Like the drill has a different one, or like the buzzsaw, not the drill. The buzzsaw, the blades, and even the rather revealing cosmetic that she has with that blade, it has a completely different blade wipe animation. I personally think they were trying to make a hostile type killer that had different approaches to how she handles situations. But I feel like they should have done it with her add-ons, not with the base kit. Because add-ons is the best way for any killer in the game to express a unique, different gameplay flow. But in the case of Skull Merchant, she has the weird situation where her add-ons reward really awkward gameplay styles, such as the difficult skill check Doctor 2.0, which ended up leading into the 1.0 Skull Merchant 3 gen. And then she has like number adjusters and expired batteries, but we don't really talk about that. And then of course unpublished manuscript, which is, I don't know, like,
So
I feel like it is there kind of with the add-ons, but at the same time they decided, nah, we're going to just have do it. It's going to be like half of them bleed into this unique idea of like, oh, she has different ways to approach a situation, and then half is like, yeah, we just adjust numbers
I think
for like the most boring stuff. That's it.
I think part of it, because people have complained like she applies too many status effects.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that's what they were going for. There's an archetype of character that does this. It's not an anti-mage. An anti-mage would be someone with silence or whatever, and that doesn't exist in this game. Well, Doctor would kind of actually. Wow, I never thought about that. Doctor's like the anti-mage. Anyways, Skull Merchant is. I feel like their design philosophy with Skull Merchant was she was supposed to. The claw traps were supposed to apply all of these different debuffs. They were supposed to hinder you. They were supposed to. I have a feeling like if they didn't not add them, but I have a feeling there was gonna be deafen stuff as well. Part of me thinks that's what shotgun speakers were originally gonna do, was deafen you. But they've gone away from that for obvious reasons. Just make it so deafen doesn't make you high pitched. That's all you got to do, and then it's a fine status effect. Anyways,
what do you mean? Like we've seen deafen so recently. When was the last time Hag's ear add-on? When was she released again? I forget.
No, knockout on Bubba.
Oh, my mistake. That was like a year ago. See, they are still playing with the deafen status effect. What are you talking about?
The deafen status effect would be such a cool design philosophy.
Like I said, thematically, it's cool, but at the same time, it's just like, what does it really do?
Well,
like it just kind of sits there.
Here's all they have to do, because the reason they haven't added deafen, at least I'm convinced the reason why, is because the high pitched noise is very disorienting for certain people. For people with audio issues and people who suffer from things like that, it's an accessibility issue. The simple solution is just get rid of the high pitched noise and just make it so you can't hear anything. That's it.
Yep.
And if they do that, they could add deafen to other things. Whatever. It's just like they added near sight, and that's another thing I was thinking about with Skull Merchant is like. I guess we can start talking about like changes I think they're going to do to her in the rework.
Before we do that though, I do want to mention, because of these changes, I feel like, and also the history of the other niche characters who've gone changed, I feel like it's going to affect how the community will feel about Skull Merchant 3.0. Because we've already talked like heads and tails about the Trickster update and how that pretty much resulted in the killer being a hot mess up to this day. And Twins have been bugged for like 2.5 years. And when they finally do get their rework, it's like, oh, we added like 1 or 2 other things for Victor. And now they are S tier. And we removed their gameplay identity, and now they are just rush with Victor, down every single person, they are invincible, there's no counterplay. That's what you wanted, right? And then the Twins players are like, no, we just wanted bug fixes. That's all we wanted behavior. And also the ability to crush Victor ourselves. Do you not listen? And because of this, and also because of the fact that they did nothing with 2.0, and they are already going like, yeah, we're reworking her again. So goodbye, Skull Merchant. Off to the Shadow Realm with you for like 6 or 7 months. It doesn't give a lot of like positive feelings for 3.0. It feels like they're going to rework her. It's going to go in a very mean direction where it will be very lovely for the casual audience. They'll know what's going on. But for Skull Merchant players, they're going to hate it because they're going to be like, this isn't the character we like. Like, this isn't why we like this character. It's just a brand new character.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have the flow that we enjoyed with old Skull Merchant.
It's
just
the
it's like
Atrox theorem.
yeah, it's the Atrox theorem. They killed the character, gave his skin to this weird robot, and the robot's like, "Hi, I'm Beatrox." You can't,
but
like,
it's
yeah, no.
What I think they're going to do. Here's what I think they're going to do. I think they're going to lean into the status effect thing.
I am really worried if they do, because
and hear me, when you have a claw trap on, it's going to hit you with, because I was thinking about this too. Another status effect they've added in that we haven't seen them do to anything else is near sight, which was something that Dredge had. Hear me out on what they're probably going to end up doing.
Already, you're cooking. I'm listening.
So they're going to go back to lack of scan. There's going to be scan lines, but they can hit you when you're they can hit you when you're standing still. Unless you're crouched. So like if you're standing still and standing, it can still hit you, but you have to crouch. That way, if you're on a gen or something, it doesn't hit you. When you get afflicted with a trap, though, you're going to get hit with mangled, hemorrhaged, not blindness, nearsight, deafened, and blindness, all at the same time, without an add-on. While you have the trap on you, she can get pinpoint accuracy like she does now. And she can also shock you, similar to how Doctor does it, while the trap's on you to stop you from doing vaulting animations and such.
No, I was thinking they were just going to turn her drone into an RCXD.
It just explodes.
Just fly that thing into the Survivor and blast them into the sun like Team Rocket. Clearly, that's what the Skull Merchant player needs. Not what they want, but what they need.
The shock thing was actually from Pixel Bush.
Yeah,
he brought up that idea, a while ago.
I have watched Pixel's video, and I have argued in my mind about whether I am for or against the shock. It's more so, I feel like Skull Merchant as a character more so utilizes her tools.
Mm-hmm.
And the shock thing, I feel like would be a very unique thing that fits Skull Merchant since she is a sadist. But at the same time, I worry that it would take away from Doctor. And would kind of lead into an awkward situation where it's just like, oh, this is Doctor 2. Like, similar to how a lot of people like to compare Huntress with Deathslinger, Trickster, Unknown. Characters like that, I do not want Doctor's identity deleted. Because Doctor and Skull Merchant already share a lot of factors. Like, Doctor and Skull Merchant have info tools in their kits. Mm-hmm. They were both characters who had infamous histories of being the DC King and Queen respectfully. And they also have a very similar lore scheme of both of them being sadists. They like seeing other people in pain. And I do not want to see... I want to keep a difference between the two. And I do not want, like, a Doctor situation where it's like, oh, the shock that you have that makes you unique? Nah, it's mine now. Joink!
So, I once again, like, what direction would we want Skull Merchant to go into? Would we want her to go more into the trap killer? Or would we want her to go more into the debuffing killer or the intel killer?
I feel like this is where we go into the situation where we use the visual aids I gave you.
Oh, yay. Kidding. Let me find that.
Bring out the visual aids, peasant. Yes, honey. uh, but yeah.
Tracking.
So
Yeah.
I have argued about whether Skull Merchant needs like a big rework or a small rework, and I made a video about this like a long, long time ago, which was reviewing Behavior's decision on making Skull Merchant 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, I thought that the changes they made were very good for the character because they wanted the character to stop 3-genning. And that was it. They just wanted the character to stop 3-genning and give a little bit of extra lethality into the character's kit. That was what they were going for, and the rework went in that direction. It added new complexity with the rotation system, and with the fact that you could change the drone's rotation was an extra feature that I feel like added a lot more complexity. And I will say it made a lot of Skull Merchant players, Jane in particular, a little bit sad because Skull Merchant in particular used to be this tracker killer, and it got hard nerfed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel like this version of Skull Merchant can still work. They just need to do something. Rather than go like, we're going to delete her from the game, have fun for like 6 or 7 months until we rework her to be like a Wesker.
Mm-hmm.
So, what this I have the stream open by the way. So what everyone is seeing on the screen is a bunch of pages that I created last night because I've been cooking
Where did
for
you
like
get this
2 or
image?
3. Oh, I made it.
Oh.
Or no, like the Skull Merchant image.
Yeah.
It's from her tome lore. A lot of the images I found off of like DBD Wiki.
Oh.
Like, I think the first and third image are on the tome lore of Renatu and Thalita and Skull Merchant.
That's badass. I wish that was like her portrait or something.
Yeah, like the tome artwork in general, when it comes to a thematic view, when you look at the tome for Skull Merchant, it's a complete dub. Like, it's just sick. I don't like the hair because I think it's a little too sleek down, but like everything about it is cool. Anyways, so what people are seeing on the screen is a bunch of changes that I considered making if Behavior decided to go not for like a full rework approach. Instead, they decide we want to readjust a few things, add a few things, remove a few things. It's more so like a soft rework.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just go through this word for word with you. So that way you see my thought mentality on what I want Skull Merchant to be. So the first page is about tracking. So these are changes that are focused around bringing back the tracking Skull Merchant 1.0 used to have. But in exchange, we are going to try and help support the casual audience. So, and also just one last thing. We are going to go at this with the idea that Behavior decided to go full throttle with the nerfs to her. So all of these changes are following through with that version of Skull Merchant.
Mm-hmm.
So, for tracking, the duration of the radar scan has been increased from 15 seconds from 12. Simple buff, it's to give you more reason to look at your radar to see where people are. However, we're going to bring something old back from PTB Merchant. The PTB eye effect appears above survivors' heads when they are tracked outside of the terror radius. So, did you ever see the evil
Yes.
eye?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, so for those who don't know, on the PTB, Skull Merchant used to have a visual eye effect that popped up on a survivor's head whenever they were tracked when they had a claw trap. I would have this eye effect appear whether they get tagged or have a claw trap, but it's only for that survivor to see. Because the PTB used to have it so anyone could see the eyeball above that survivor. So this is just like a visual aid to help the player know, oh, Skull Merchant sees me on her radar. And if you are inside her terror radius and you hear it's growing, well, I think you already know what's about to happen. Alright. So next up, the next two changes. Lock-on stacks passively vanish after not being scanned for 45 seconds. This is a change that I personally think is a lot more better, rather than hacking the drone to remove a stack. A lot of people have argued the idea of, let's go hack a drone and get it to remove a stack. With the current version of Skull Merchant, it would not work. And with this version of Skull Merchant, I feel like it would be a little too overkill. Because the threat of being able to remove the lock-on stack by hacking the drone leads Skull Merchant more into Antiloop, because it's like, okay, I drop drone at loop, get a scan of lock-on, recall drone, so that way they can't run back to hack the drone to remove it. So having a passive effect, I think, is a bit more of a healthier alternative.
I think the one change I would make to that is maybe make it so the one stack goes away passively,
Yes.
and the last, like, so she would still have 3 stacks. The third stack doesn't
Yes.
matter in this equation because
Yeah, the third stack doesn't matter.
But-
Like, I think hold on, let me ask you. Are you saying that when after 45 seconds one stack goes away but you still keep one?
yeah, you still keep one. The other one, like the last stack, to fully remove it, you would have to hack a drone.
Yeah, no, I was thinking of that too. I think I just worded that weirdly. It might have just been me at 2 a.m. just wording it awkwardly. But, like, I agree with you on that statement. Like, 45 seconds, one stack goes away. The next 45 seconds, if you didn't get scanned, it goes away. It's to help people, it's to help with the idea that, okay, Skull Merchant collects information on people, and when she finds enough, she pushes leverage on you.
Mm-hmm.
But she shouldn't just have information on you because that lasts forever, because people are constantly changing. There are some things about them that just update. Right. So, in that sense, having it passively go away, I feel like would make it a bit more healthier. To make it feel like getting claw trapped is more rewarding. And if they do get claw trapped, it's because they're an idiot. If it's out of chase.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's in chase, well, we're going to talk about that in the next few pages. And one more change for tracking. Skull Merchant can now see survivors' lock-on stack count.
Mm-hmm.
So, how it currently works, I think a lot of people do not realize this. Skull Merchant does not see the lock-on stacks. Like, she sees if someone has a lock-on stack, but she can't tell if it's 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like a full circle with the triangles on it. So, it's like a mental game of trying to think, do they have 1 or do they have 2? But because the stacks now passively vanish, and because there's so much information that the survivors get, I felt like it was only fair that she gets that information too.
Yeah, I think that's it, because that also that can lead to some interesting gameplay of like hit and run as well. Even with the stacks going away at 45 seconds, it could lead to hit and run situations of like, okay, well, I'll leave them for like 20 seconds and then come back.
Yeah. And also because of the lock-on stacks, you can see if someone gets 2 stacks, look at your radar and go like, all right, it's time to go in. And you start power walking your way with your sachet strut to that survivor with 2 lock-on stacks. And you're like, honey, time for you to run into the drones. And they're like, no, please have mercy. Which is the idea that I wanted for her. It's more so like, if she sees that someone has multiple stacks because they made mistakes, she's going to push for it. Just like any other trap killer. Like, if Trapper has a survivor step into a trap, he's going to run for them. This is the same logic. But the only difference is they still have one last chance to not get tagged. But she's still going to push you to make it a very difficult challenge to get rid of it. Alright, let's go on to the next page.
I did.
Alright, good. This is the rotation system update in a trap playstyle. So these are changes that are focused on providing unique gameplay skill expression with a revamped rotation system and enhanced trap playstyle. So, as I said, it's bleeding into the changes behavior made with Skull Merchant already. It's just kind of expanding on it more and trying to make some type of logic with it. So, stealth drones, completely gone. I understand why they removed it. Some people just didn't have the patience to look at the funny low light on the skull's head and behind it. But in replacing it, I have another idea. And we'll get to it soon. So scouting drones now have 1 scan line, as the patch says, but its rotation speed is increased by 100 degrees for compensation. And here I want to introduce something interesting. Placing a drone puts it into the disabled mode for 10 seconds.
That would stop her from using it at a loop.
Exactly. This is a change that I personally think would easily lead Skull Merchant away from Antiloop Merchant playstyle.
I think if they could just add that in right now, and I'd be cool with it.
Yeah. Like, the big idea that I had with this was, what are changes that behavior could do that would be quick for them to do with this current PTB cycle to live? And that is my thought process. Like, there is a change that is on this page that will take a little bit of extra work, but I feel like they could do it if they push through.
Mm-hmm.
So, like as we mentioned, and that you noticed, putting the drone in disabled for 10 seconds when you plop the drone just removes the I plop drone at loop, it's now countered. Have fun, because now you have to wait.
Yeah, it's literally the night change they did. Where it has to go out at least 10 meters.
Yeah, and I will say, I did think about Poor Pixel and some addiction to laser tagging.
Mm-hmm.
There's an add-on to save his crippling addiction. We'll get to it later, though. So, the rotation, or the change rotation of the drone button that you used to have on the radar, it's been replaced with a new system. It's called Overclock Drone. So, you aim it at a drone across the map or right in front of you, like how you recall a drone. Overclocking a drone causes it to rotate at 720 degrees within 1.5 seconds. But it needs a 0.5 second time to prepare for it. And there will be a sound cue for the survivor to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the idea of like a Beyblade. You aim it at like a drone, you prep it up, you're like, let it rip! And the drone just starts spinning massively quickly. The idea of this was to push more for like the Skull Merchant mentality of, I want to scan a area and I want to make sure that it's safe, but I know the drone is slow. So I'm going to overclock the drone so that way I can get a secure tell at that location is good. Plus, it brings back something that Skull Merchant 1.0 used to have that a lot of old Skull Merchant's mains loved, and that was macro management. So one of the things that people liked about old Skull Merchant was reactivating drones, recalling this drone, plopping this drone, reactivating the drone across the map over there, because there was a lot of things you did with the radar. But with this version of Skull Merchant, the only thing she really does is, I recall drone, I plop it at loop. Maybe I'll change the rotation of this drone because the survivor's running into it. I needed to touch him. But that's it. With this version, it pushes for, or it helps give a little bit of aggressiveness with information. Because you get to scan an area across the map, or you can scan a loop and have it laser tag a survivor who isn't prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just thinking. Go on.
All right. Overclock drones become disabled afterwards for 10 seconds. This is just to make sure that the drone doesn't just, after spinning, go like, okay, I'm going to keep on spinning at 100 degrees now. This is more like more of a recovery for the survivor. They're just like, okay, I still have a little bit of time to loop after that.
And it also feeds into the skill expression and the risk reward of it as well. I can see that.
Yeah, because you're risking the drone going disabled for information of that spot or using it as an aggressive tool.
Mm-hmm.
And then Overclock Drone has a 15-second cooldown.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want you just spamming Overclock on every single drone to scan every single corner of the globe. Mm-hmm. I just want... It's more so an idea of, like, I want to scan one particular area, so I need to be smart. Do I use it on that drone there? Or that drone here? Or do I save it for this chase that I'm about to do, where I know I'm leading someone to a pre-prepped drone?
Right.
Alright, let's go on to third page, which is probably the second smallest amount of changes. And this is weaponized claw traps. These are changes that are designed around providing a beneficial reward for obtaining claw traps that feels earned.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big problems that people have with current Skull Merchant is that it feels like claw traps are just easy victory tools, because they get claw trapped to lose a health state, and now they're slowed for like 10%. Granted, it's now 5% and the haste is gone, so we need to give a proper reward back into the claw trap, since the secondary effect is now to hinder what is the primary function outside of damage state.
Mm-hmm.
So, claw traps now last for 60 seconds from 45. This is to lean more with Skull Merchant's scouting or tracking identity. However, Claw traps can now be removed after one lock-on stack expires through the hacking minigame. So this is also bringing back an old effect from PTB Merchant, where you used to be able to remove the claw trap when it ran out of battery life, but as compensation, you could refresh the battery life.
Mm-hmm.
You still can refresh the battery life now, but this one is more so to give like casual survivors who made a mistake outside of chase, where it's like they accidentally ran into traps 3 times and get claw trapped. They now have like the 20-second window where they can get rid of the claw trap. But now they have to be careful because Skull Merchant sees them. So she's going to realize, I need to go after this guy. Otherwise I lose that information. Oh, and she may lose the new effect, which I gave her, which is an updated effect from her 1.0 days.
Mm-hmm. It used to be an add-on, and they added the base kit, and
yep, it used to be add-on, then they added the base kit, and then it just vanished into thin air with 2.0. And it made me cross when that happened, because I feel like that was the coolest part about Skull Merchant. Anyway, so the updated version is claw traps now latch onto pallets after a survivor vault them, removing the claw trap and causing the pallet to self-destruct after 5 seconds. This is to return the old disillusion effect that Skull Merchant had, giving survivors just a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that way they see the claw trap latched onto the pallet. They know they have to be careful because they only have a 5-second window now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not an instant death. This is not like Disillusioned Clown, where they vault the pallet and they are slowed, and then the pallet breaks, and they're on the floor and they're crying about it now. This is more so a much more controlled situation where the claw trap feels potent, but fair.
Yeah, I mean, I can see. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems. As much as I like Disillusion, I mean, Disillusion still has a time limit, even if often you can be kind of forced. But the 5-second buffer means that she can't just chase you behind a pallet and then instantly hit you. You can still just vault it and run away.
There was also another problem when it came to Disillusion on Skull Merchant with her base kit. So you could constantly reach the battery life with the drones. So survivors could not outplay this claw trap because they're working on a time limit that's constantly refreshing back to 45, back to 45, back to 45.
Mm-hmm.
And they just have to vault windows. And the one time that they do have to vault that pallet, it's been refreshed by the drone and it breaks and Skull Merchant gets a free hit. And I still want to keep the fact that you can refresh the battery life. But I want it more so to feel like it is a earned effect from the claw trap that feels rewarding for both the survivor and the killer side equally.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so next page is final adjustments. These are just last minute, or not last minute, but like just minor tweaks that I would make with these additions that I couldn't really put on those pages. And they also help to solve smaller problems that players have with Skull Merchant. So the first two actually are another problem that I didn't mention. Drone range increased to 12 meters from 10. This is to help Skull Merchant with her tracking identity, give her a bit more of a bigger bubble. And also, because the drones now have a 16-meter radius where they are invisible, it just reduces the time for you to notice until the scan line is visible with the current change. Next up, drones cannot be placed 16 meters near other drones from 12. This is a big problem that people have with drones, and that is the fact that you can plop a drone down and sit next to another drone, and it feels like they're kissing each other.
Yeah, I see that happen. I do that all the time.
Yeah, me too. Like, I don't mean it intentionally. I don't mean it. Like, most of the time I place my drones very sparsely from each other, but there are moments where they have to overlap because the map is squished.
Mm-hmm.
But with this change, it means that it's much more of a harsher limit. It's like, listen, we don't want the drones to be touching at all because we don't want people crying about it. Plus, I feel like it's a bit of a, situation. Also, I feel like I may have missed the drone range. I'm trying to remember. Is it 10 or 12? I'm a Skull Merchant player. How do I not remember this?
I couldn't tell you offhand.
Hold on. I'm searching the DBD wiki. I need to make sure about this.
I was gonna say one thing I do. I have thought about a little bit. This might be insane for a rework idea. Hear me out though. What if instead of Skull Merchant placing her drones manually, they're pre-placed at the start of the match, but she can control where they move?
Hmm. If you can control how they move to specific locations, I think that would be a little nicer.
So,
Because
like,
behavior logic when it comes to placing items has always been funky, especially with Sadako. There was a game where I played on the it's the other Borgo map, the one that came out with
the D&D one?
Vecna.
Yeah.
Yes. There were 3 TVs that were kissing each other
It
upstairs.
happens on Erie all the time. They're like right outside the
I
window.
I I saw it and I'm like, what on earth is this? So
Um,
if we were to live in a world where Skull Merchant had her drones spawn around the map randomly, unless you could control where they went afterwards,
that's
I
what I'm
would not
saying. That's
I
what I'm
would
saying.
not agree with it.
What I'm
But with
saying
that
is,
idea,
what if
yes, I would agree.
like let's take a mixture of like Knight and Nemesis to a degree.
Okay.
So so her drones spawn on the map like already. They're already active. They're on the map.
Mm-hmm.
And she can use her PDA or phone or Nokia or whatever you want to call it, and she can select the drone. And then I don't know how they would do the controls, but I would have two controls. I would have one that lets you manually move it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, I don't know how they would do it, but I would have one that lets them manually move it, and then one that lets it come towards you.
Hmm. I feel like with the manual one, a cool idea that would just be a nice visual flair is if you switch camera angles from Skull Merchant to the drone.
Which we know they can do. They did it with Singularity.
Yeah, they did with Singularity. I could easily see like a rework for this working, but
And
this
obviously,
is
it
much
wouldn't be
more.
scanning while it's moving, by the way.
Yeah, obviously not.
Um,
Because if it did, then oh dear, good gracious, this poor community would be a dumpster fire.
my point with that is that right there would already get rid of the plop the drone playstyle.
Hmm.
And it would make them more traps because let's say you're at a loop with I mean, how many times does this happen with Nemesis? No, okay, maybe not that often. But how many times do people play Nemesis? A zombie happens to be nearby and they literally just wait.
Yeah, like a lot of people. I bet a lot of people will go like, a zombie is at every single loop I go, and then there are other people are there like, there's zombies on the map.
But that would also give her like, and you know what I would do while they can't scan and do the lock on thing while they're
Hmm.
moving, they can give intel.
Yeah.
If a survivor happens to pass through the drone while it's moving, she can check her what is it? Anyways,
Nokia.
is it a phone?
No, like I think it's just like a GPS tracker that she built herself.
Whatever it is, like while it's moving, if a survivor moves like in its range during that,
Yeah.
then she can look at it and like she'll see like it'll make a sound and like you can check it and get the ping.
Hmm.
Because that would
Like
lead her more into intel, and that would
yeah.
lead her more into not being an anti-loop killer necessarily, and more of a trap one. She's pre-thinking.
Yeah. I personally think that that would be a really nice rework, but at the same time, this is a rework that's
Yeah,
more big budget.
I got you.
This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
more one that would take a lot more time.
I'm just spitballing.
Yeah, like I like the idea. I think it's cool, but at the same time, it's a rework that I feel like would take a lot more time. And in the case of Skull Merchant, and for the poor community that are busy losing it over these changes, I feel like we need something that's a bit more immediate
Yeah,
in like
I
in the
just
hands of the developers.
I'm just thinking of it because there's another thing with her design and with actually one of these images is what made me think of that. It's this one, the image on the weaponized claw trap.
Hmm. The weaponized claw trap one, where the drones are just floating there menacingly,
Yeah.
staring at
Well,
Renatu and
it's
Thalita.
also in her Mori, which technically
Hmm.
was updated. She has a
Yeah.
drone that comes out and like scans the survivor. The
Yep.
way she uses her drones, like I don't know, I'm not really the biggest up to date on her lore. Doesn't she kind of have like an irreverence for her drones a little bit?
There is no mention of the drones in her lore.
Oh right,
None
never
at
mind.
all.
Okay, never mind then.
Like, this is the biggest mystery in the world outside of if it's not butter, then what is it? Because her lore just doesn't mention anything about drones. The first part mentions too much about her father and how he is a struggling manga artist, and how she becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. And then the tome lore expands on Skull Merchant being like, oh yeah, no, she was just evil the whole time. She just uses her dad's manga character as like a Batman facade to allow her to get away with whatever she wants.
So
Because she kills people in the business office emotionally, but physically she kills people dressed up as Skull Merchant because she knows she can get away with it.
because like I was sitting, like I was thinking, like for some reason I don't know why I thought I knew that was a thing. I knew her drones were never mentioned. Um, it's one of those things where it's like I feel like her drones like are part of her power, but I would rather them be an extension of her power.
I agree. I
Um,
feel like Skull Merchant is very similar. I mentioned this earlier with Hostel and Saw,
mhm,
where I feel like they are just accessories that she plops down because to her it's another form of torture for the player.
mhm.
But at the same time, it is something to help her just play into the fantasy of being this threatening killer that chases after the big bad guys.
And
And
it
that's why I personally like the current version of Skull Merchant, where you plop the drones and you let them do their own thing.
mhm.
Similar to like a trap killer. Because that's what Skull Merchant wants. She just wants to leave the drones there just to tell her where someone is, just to help her know that someone is suffering, and then she goes in for the final finish.
I'm kind of like leaning more instead of her, because based on her lore, she seems more like, and maybe this is me talking up Skull Merchant, but in her lore, like from what I understand, she's very intelligent, isn't she? Like she's a fucking millionaire.
Yeah, she's a multi-millionaire from the age of like 16, if I remember, because she made like a website to sell mangas from Brazil, where instead of paying people with money, she's like, I pay you with exposure, it's fine.
So like my idea is like make her an intelligent pre-planning killer. Because the
Mm,
closest thing we have to that in the game is Singularity. Maybe you can make that argument. I would, but I know some
yeah.
wouldn't. And
In the case of Singularity, I feel like it's more so like just machine.
mhm,
Like when I play Singularity and a lot of people said, this is the Skull Merchant we all wanted. I looked at it and I'm like, it doesn't really feel like Skull Merchant. Like it's a tracking identity. I
mhm,
can see that. I'm not blind. I can see it. But it's a different type of tracking fantasy. This
mhm.
is machine from terrifying sci-fi horror that they were trying to go, where machine goes way too far. Skull Merchant is the identity of someone who uses machines, but it's put in the hands of someone cruel. In the
Right.
case of Singularity, it's just machine doing machine things.
Yeah, and for me, like I think the closest we had to like ironically, it's not the mastermind. Closest thing we had to like a mastermind type killer, like one who's trying to think like three steps ahead on like how their
Mm.
power is like being used is Pinhead,
Yeah.
kinda.
Fun- Funnily enough, there are a lot of moments that Pinhead can be smart with the fact that you can use the chains to track, or not track, but more so just get a bird's eye view of certain locations. You don't
Hmm.
even have to hit a guy with a chain. You can use that as a scouting tool.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The other closest we have, and it kind of is where the idea of moving the drone stems from a bit, is Knight. But even then, it's not so
Mm,
much you're like thinking three moves ahead. You're just kind of like, you take care of him while I take care of him.
yeah.
With my idea, it's more like you're like, okay, I'll move the drone here, so when we start moving towards that location, it will be prepped for that moment.
Yeah. I feel like in that sense it does work, but we also have to be careful because Skull Merchant was very easily designed around the idea of what could we create as a modern day trap killer.
Hmm.
Because Skull Merchant solves a lot of, as you said, she solves a lot of problems that Hag and Trapper had. She doesn't have the problem of a slow setup time
Hmm.
because she just plops the drone and then she just has to wait like 10 seconds, but that 10 seconds ends when she just goes somewhere else.
Right.
And that setup speed of the drone is almost instant. The moment she plops it, boom, it starts working. And I feel like that ends up being a double-edged sword that leans into the Antiloop, which, with the changes that I proposed, tries to push away from the anti-loop and more towards the trap identity
Speaking of the
that behavior
changes,
want.
yeah. Speaking of the changes, you can keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That thought just popped in my head, and I wanted to get it out there while I was thinking. About it.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Like, hearing other ideas is also good, because Skull Merchant, just in general, is a character that you could. This is the big reason why I also like Skull Merchant. She is a character that I can see having potential for so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the visual identity allows her to just play around different ideas of like how to use different gadgets. And it's why I like looking at reworks for Skull Merchant, because every single one of them, although I may a few things, disagree with others, even Pixel's rework to an extent has this identity flow, where it shows that the character can be so many interesting ideas with their visuals, because they can be focused on their gadget, or they can be focused as using the gadget as a secondary element. It's just that creative flow that she has, that unlike other killers, like in the case of Hag, if you gave Hag, like, I don't know, she just sets up biopods around the map, it wouldn't feel like it works for the visual identity. But in the case of Skull Merchant, it feels like she could be many different things. Mostly because it is pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, so exceptionally extra in certain spots like the mask. Alright. Let's get back to the rework with the proposed changes. Drone deployment cooldown has been removed. Since the drones now take 10 seconds to restart when deployed, and the fact that they restart after 10 seconds from overclock, I thought that just another cooldown with drone deployment would just be way too much. Plus, also, the drones cannot be 60 meters nearby. Around the time that she's able to deploy the drone again, the cooldown's going to be done anyway, so I decided to remove it.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes her just feel a bit smooth.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And this is a change that every single Skull Merchant has cried about, and I agree with it too, making ultrasonic speaker base kit, which is just making the rotation immunity cut by like 0.75 seconds, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, and now we move on to the last page, which is a whole list of add-on changes. I personally really like what I did with Eddie Valente #1 and shotgun speakers. They finally actually have effects that feel usable.
Mm-hmm.
And I will allow everyone to read through what they want, and you can ask me if there's anyone that you are curious about. But I will say, I will talk about the iridescent add-ons. So, expired batteries, I ended up saying in my head, oh yeah, this is the Pixel Bush add-on. Because expired batteries, now the drones start overclocked when you deploy them. However, the drones are disabled by overclock, take 50% longer to repair.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of like 10 seconds of a disabled drone itself, in exchange, when you plop the drone, it instantly starts rotating quickly.
I see.
This is more so just to help Pixel and people who like laser tagging.
Yeah. Overclock transportation in the opposite direction after repairing. That's an interesting one. I actually kind of like that. It's like,
which one?
The adaptive lighting. Overclock drones rotate in the opposite direction after repairing.
Oh, the adaptive lighting. That was my attempt to somewhat implement the old rotation system that players use.
I just like it because it's a similar add-on to to Clown's VHS corn add-on.
Oh, VHS corn.
I love it. I've got like 1,000 of them.
Yeah, our beloved.
Prototype.
But
there's a scouting mode rotation by 5%. Disable drones from deployment and overclock recover 2 seconds faster. Upon I can't read that. Upon something a window with a vaulting a window with a claw trap that is blocked by the
Yeah, this is my approach of thinking, okay, so you remember how I said I feel like half the add-ons are just ways to give Skull Merchant unique playstyles and the other half are just number tweaks?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I decided to push more for the idea that this is a character with just tools of torment This is a character that has different ways to just punish players with unique methods.
And
And
you even have one in here that gives her the undetectable too. That's a nice
uh,
touch.
that is my way of keeping the undetectable player base happy. But at the same time, I felt like it just could not stay in the base kit.
Increases scan lines to 2.
Oh right, I almost forgot. I think I wrote it down somewhere on one of the pages, but I said undetectable has been removed from
Yeah, I was on the
playing
first
grounds.
page. You
Oh,
didn't
on the
say it,
first
but I
page?
saw it. I saw it.
Ah, I see, okay. But yeah, no, I feel like it's just something that cannot exist with the version of Skull Merchant that I made. Especially since how frustrating undetectable can be on Skull Merchant. I
Mhm.
wanted to keep it in the kit, so I made an add-on. But this ended up inadvertently having to change iridescent unpublished manuscript since it had a similar effect to advanced movement prediction.
Mhm.
But I think that you'll find the unpublished manuscript rather goofy.
If I could find it,
It's
unpublished.
in the middle.
It's in the middle.
Yep, with the iridescent add-ons and stuff.
It says iridescent at this front. Survivors can no longer hack Clawtrot, so battery life is reduced to 30 seconds. Upon downing a Clawtrot survivor, all survivors within 24 meters gain 1 stack.
Yeah, just down the lock-on or a claw trap survivor, 2 people are just claw trapped instantly. Oh, I just imagining that is just so funny to me.
Do you want to make Skull Merchant a slugging killer? Because that's how you make Skull Merchant a slugging killer.
No, like it's still the claw traps don't injure, don't forget. But like in this approach, I feel like this is like an eerie add-on that's just more for goofiness. And
Yeah.
since it's reducing the battery life, it's more a risk-reward approach. Because it's like I only have 30 seconds. Granted, you could reset the battery life. Maybe that's another thing. You can't reset battery life with drone scans. Like maybe you could do that too. But like I just wanted something a bit more funny for like a eerie add-on because Behavior only now started doing goofy stuff with iridescent add-ons. Before they were so boring. Like Garden of Rot, I hit someone with Swarm. They're now exposed for like 3 seconds. Oh wow, great add-on artist.
That was back when they were adding like an exposed add-on to every killer.
Yeah, every single killer had an exposed add-on, such as Trickster, who had
Photo
signed
card.
autograph.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, it was autograph, not photo card.
yeah, and then they started only now doing funny add-ons with iridescence, like Alucard Shield. I must say, when I saw the PTB and I saw the add-ons, I thought half of them were boring, but then I saw Cube of Zoe, and I saw Shield or Alucard Shield, and I thought to myself, oh heck yeah, we are returning to funny add-ons now.
It's weird too because like I think I'm not the only one who's brought this up. Add-on rarity is kind of pointless,
Yeah.
and I feel like at this point they should just like I feel like browns should just be stat increases, yellows should be status effects, greens should be like I don't know what greens could be.
Yeah, no, like I agree with you. Like even with the changes that I made, you can see that like the commons and uncommons are more so like number tweakers.
Mm-hmm.
And rare, the infrared upgrade is a bit of a odd exception from the other greens because every single green add-on that Skull Merchant has is a status effect manipulator.
Yeah.
But I really wanted infrared upgrade to just be different because before it was just aura reveal. Why? Why does Skull Merchant, the character who has a radar to tell her where people are, why does she have 2 add-ons that give her aura reading? Make it make sense. Why?
The simple solution to that, by the way, because I have heard complaints about when you're playing a Skull Merchant, it's hard to know when to start looking at your radar. One, the light turns on. That's a big thing. But a simple solution, and I only realized this when I was playing Survivor the other day because I didn't even know this was a thing. Did you know alert has a sound effect when it goes off?
Alert?
Yes.
Yeah, I knew it.
Yeah. Why doesn't every other aura read have that?
Because Behavior are too busy putting their budget in Sable cosmetics. They don't have the time to give other perks audio effects.
I don't. Would it be like? The aura read thing is a whole of a discussion, but like for Skull Merchant, would it be so hard to add a sound effect when someone is like able to be seen on the radar.
I would like it.
Like
I think
it
every
just
single
goes
Skull Merchant player would like it.
twang, and then you can just pull out the radar and look.
Like, if I remember, there used to be a sound effect for Skull Merchant when a drone got. I'm trying to remember.
I don't think
It
there
was.
was.
No, it's all the way back in Skull Merchant 1.0. There was like a sound effect when a drone got hacked in Recall Tour. It was like, eh.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Before the sound effect, it was like a shoulder toss that she did. And I hated that shoulder toss. It gave me a headache. Like, I don't know why. It just made me feel sick whenever I saw it. I'm like, can we please just change it to a sound cue? Why is she throwing her shoulder out of its bone slot? What is the point?
This is really off topic. Can we make Gearhead have the alert sound effect?
Gearhead? Oh, easily. I would love it. But then it would mean they have to spend less time on Sable and Fang cosmetics.
Fair
And
enough.
behavior don't have that time.
I mean, we just got a Michaela cosmetic. They have some time. They got a whole
No.
month. They got a whole month
No.
before the next one.
They don't have enough time. They must think of the next Sable cosmetic. Quick, throw her another bikini skin. Surely it will sell.
Is there a recolor of the summer skin for Sable?
Honestly, I'm surprised if there isn't.
I would be surprised if they don't add one, honestly.
Yeah, it's just in the next tome's one, obviously. Like, next tome comes out, Sable gets a recolor of her beach outfit.
But
Easy.
But this whole rework that you came up with, though, I like it because, like you said, it seems like stuff that could. I'm going to use this word relatively, but it seems like stuff that could easily be added on now.
Yeah, that is the approach that I wanted with the Skull Merchant changes. And you know what's funny? Behavior have had a year to think of changes for Skull Merchant. I thought of all of this in 2 days. They've had a year to listen to community feedback, to think about problems with the character's kit. They could have solved all of these problems, but no, they decided we're going to sledgehammer the character out of existence. Meanwhile, me, a random guy who likes to yell about perks for videos, like once in a blue moon because my uploading schedule is undead, I just decide, I'm gonna spend like a day or two thinking of a Skull Merchant change with what they did. Ta-da! Here it is. And then I spent like the next 2 hours making these visual cards.
Something I want to do real quick. I do want to watch Skull Merchant's original trailer. Because I'm curious. Hang on.
Hold on, I have the stream pulled up. Let me watch too. Okay. Let me get some popcorn. I'm chilling.
The reason I want to watch this is because I'm curious if there's anything in here that could tell us. So there's the tracking. There is, like, nothing in that trailer other than the tracking.
Yep. Like, the only thing I can tell is the fact that she had the floodlights prepped. Like, that puts the idea of, like, okay, she is preparing for them to enter the stage, for her to do this whole big theatrical approach of going, like, I am the Skull Merchant. I merchant the skulls. I'm ready to flay you with my funny little predator-like blade.
Like...
And that's it.
Do they even, like, get the traps put on them?
No. It's just the drone staring at them menacingly.
I've never even noticed that. There is, like, nothing in this trailer.
Nope. It's just stunning 8K graphics. Like, look at Skull Merchant in the shadows. She just looks so good. Like, clearly they spent at least 2K on that.
I've never really even thought about that. Wow, there is nothing in this trailer.
Yep, I feel like they put more attention into Hinatu and Thalita. when it comes to the detail. Because I really like the duality of the two characters, of them being siblings, and how they provide tools to help just with the idea of teamwork. I feel like that was the big approach that they were going for. And they just happened to be working on a killer that was all about tracking. And they thought to themselves, hey, we have these two Brazilian siblings. Why don't we just pair them together with this intel gatherer? So that way it feels more like a Saw or Hostile movie, where it's like these two siblings find themselves in an awkward situation against a master intel gatherer hunter. And it's just like, okay, cool. But the problem is they had like 2 years to develop Hinato and Thalita separately and pair them together. But in the case of Skull Merchant, it was more so like a separate idea that they just threw in there.
Something else that I think about, and especially looking at this trailer now, remember how I mentioned earlier how I feel like Skull Merchant, like the design docket was making intelligence killer? And I really do think that when they were making her, that's all she was going to be.
Yeah.
There was going to be no buffs, no debuffs, no claw traps, no nothing. It was just going to be her drones know where you are.
Yep. Even the PTB effect that she had, and to an extent Skull Merchant 1.0 before they gave her haste manipulation.
And I think the reason they didn't do it is because it would be, not for me, I would love that. It would be boring as fuck.
Yeah. Like, just pure intel is something that's not enough for some people. Like, there are people who would eat that up. Like, they want a killer that's purely based around intel gathering. But at the same time, we are living in Dead by Daylight 2024, where M1 killer needs to have some form of anti-loop, they need to have some form of slowdown, they need to be able to keep themselves running around in a match.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing with this, is like, because I think, like, even if they rework Skull Merchant, I actually don't care if Skull Merchant is bad.
Yeah.
Let me make. I don't care if she's bad or if she's boring or if she's not that good. The problem with the change they're doing is that they're gutting her in prep to rework. It's the precedent it's setting is that I don't like. But characters are allowed to be bad. I'm fine with that. There's like obvious exceptions, but as long as like the character fits the fantasy and the gameplay that the devs and the players want, I'm cool with them being bad. It's why, like, with Trapper, I've said this so many times. I mean, I always joke that Skull Merchant is the Trapper rework everyone wants, but
no, I make the same joke. I say that Skull Merchant is the modern day Trapper.
Oh, you should start with all his traps. So, like Skull Merchant. Oh, his traps should do something that loops, like Skull Merchant.
Yeah. Like, I will say, I do agree with you. There are a lot of people who like to make this joke. There's a streamer for Overwatch called Super. He is a pro Overwatch League player. XD. He is a retired he's a retired pro player. But he made a joke in Overwatch 2 that I watched in one of his videos, and I couldn't agree with it more. He said, sometimes it is more important to balance a character based around fun. So, he was talking about a character named Orisa. So, currently in Overwatch 2, Orisa is just a character who's very boring to play as and against.
Yeah, she's just a meat sponge, basically.
Yeah, she literally is, I cannot die the character. Because there's nothing else about her. Because you just cycle through her cooldowns. That's it. And Super said this himself, especially in the case of like Ramatra and Mauga. Mauga especially, when he first came out. Some characters should stay bad, especially if they disrupt the fun of the general audience. And I feel like that's why Behavior were so scared to change Skull Merchant after the rework. Because I feel like they wanted Skull Merchant to stay as a mid-tier killer, where she's able to be functional, but at the same time she's not S tier or A tier or B tier. She is a killer that's able to be played, and for the people who like her, they're going to like her. And yeah, that's how she's lived for like a year now. She hasn't received any changes because I think the developers were just afraid that if they make one change, all of a sudden she just escalates out of control. But at the same time, I feel like it's their fear of not changing her that has resulted in the situation that we're in right now, where we have a character who's being sent to the Shadow Realm, but we've had a full year where they've done nothing with her. So it feels out of left field. It's like, why are you deleting her from the game when you had a year to listen to feedback and you did nothing with that feedback?
So I think Myers is another good example because they said Myers is on the rework docket. And there are some people who are scared that Myers is going to lose the feeling of being Myers with the update.
Of course. Like, this is the fear that every single player has when they hear their character's going to get a rework. And especially for players who have niche audiences for characters, this is the biggest fear that they have. I'm actually terrified if they ever say we want to update Artist. Because Artist as a killer is extremely niche. Like, you never see her, and when you do, people suck at Artist because they don't know what she's like. But for me, who's someone who absolutely cherishes Sniper Artist, who just cross-maps people on a daily, if I hear that they want to update her, I'm going to think to myself, oh dear, my one character who I can play in the killer role is going to get deleted from the game.
But yeah, because like with Myers, it's like because a lot of Myers mains, there's not many of them, but all the ones I know, a lot of them are like they want like tiny updates, obviously, like add-on fixes and things like that. But for the most part, they're happy with how his gameplay is in general. It feels like Michael Myers. That's the thing with like Chucky. I've always said people have always talked about changing him, and I'm like, well, you can do all these things, but when you do all of these things, it's not Chucky anymore.
Exactly.
Like a lot of people are like a lot of people are like, oh, make it so the ghost follows him around so survivors can see him at loops. That's not Chucky, though.
Like, Twins and their rework had the exact same problem, where Victor was given so much power that he immediately just became unstoppable. Like, he just kept running after person, constantly damaging them, injuring them. Like, it was just a legion, but better, because they ran constantly fast as a little hobgoblin that players had to listen for, and if he missed, big whoop, he had a easy recovery time, and if he hit you, he was immune. He could even hit you through Dead Hard, and he only gripped you when you entered the dying state. And a lot of Twins mains, Pixel mentioned this too. He said Twins doesn't feel like Twins anymore. They just feel like slugging Pub Stomp Killer, the character.
I'm gonna bring up League again.
Oh, please bring
there
up
was
League.
a couple times I wanted to bring it up. Okay, there's two characters I want to bring up, and then I won't mention League ever again. I hopefully, probably.
What do you mean? I love League.
The first one.
Don't you remember Mr. Yone? Such a fantastic character.
The first character from League I want to bring up, and this is in relation to Twins, is Nunu and Willop.
Oh.
Now, you'll notice something for people who used to play League back in the day. I said Nunu and Willump. Because when Nunu got his rework, they made it so their name was both of them. Because one of the main things they wanted to do with the rework was make it feel like you were playing as two characters at once, while playing as one. And they accomplished that very well.
Yeah, like, we've seen Riot try dual characters before. Like, we've seen it with Quinn and Valor, and Kled and Skarl, and Wolf and Lamb with Kindred. But Nunu and Willump is the only one that truly feels like these are two characters in one. Because in the case of Quinn and Valor, it very much just feels like Quinn 80% of the game, and then Valor is there as an ultimate, as a cosmetic option. Because it's
people.
Yeah, that's why I say 80%. 10% of the time he's making it go vroom vroom like a Uber, and the other 10% he's looking at someone menacingly. He's like, you're going to take extra damage in particular. And then we have Wolf and Lamb, who I felt like was the second closest. Where, like, Wolf, you're able to deploy a field, you're able to use Wolf as, like, the finishing move on the E, but at the same time, it felt like you just plopped an AI. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, a lot more focus was put in Lamb.
But like,
then, who was the other one that I mentioned? Oh, Kled and Skarl. Kled and Skarl was also really good, though, I have to admit.
To be fair, for the Kled and Skarl one, I don't think the idea with them was to make you feel like you're playing two.
Yeah, it's more so Kled and an accessory.
Yeah,
that's the identity.
I think that was the idea. I think the whole point was like to emphasize the fact that Kled doesn't really care about Skrull.
Yeah, and when Skrull goes away, he gets angry because he's like, "Where's my meat shield? I need the extra HP."
There are people listening who don't know anything about League who have no idea what we're talking about.
Oh, they are thinking we are sniffing something, and it's fantastic. Just like every single Skull Merchant player. They're sniffing Legion Cold Dirt add-ons every day.
More on the Skull Merchant thing, the character I do want to bring up, because we talked about Yorick and Poppy, who were very close in like the history of how Skull Merchant is being handled right now.
Very accurate.
I wanted to bring up Yuumi.
Oh, when you mentioned League, I started thinking of Yuumi instantaneously. I'm like, oh, that terrible little parasite. I remember her.
Yuumi is similar to Skull Merchant in a specific way.
Yeah.
Yuumi is a character. For those who don't know.
Let me just break it down very simply. Yuumi is the new player character. It's even in the name, you and me. So Yuumi was designed for new players to League, for people who had no idea how to play League of Legends, because League of Legends is a very daunting game. There are a lot of effects on different characters. There is pings, there's coordination, you have to learn CS, there's item build paths, there's ability build paths. You have to move your character to dodge skill shots and abilities. There are a lot of things that you have to take into account as a new player. And the tutorial for League sucks. Like, it's bare bones.
Is there a game with a good tutorial? Because people say that about every game. Is there a PvP game with a good tutorial?
I mean, Rainbow Six Siege has like a pretty decent one that has updated. But at the same time, it's only good when it works.
Yeah.
Because I had a friend who started playing Rainbow, he never got the tutorial. But when I started, I got it and the moment I loaded in. But in the case of Yuumi, it was literally designed as the new player character. Because unlike other characters in the game who can take damage, who need to dodge skill check, or like, not skill checks.
Skill shots?
I mean, for some people, they dodge skill checks. Have you seen Leon players? They're petrified of them. But, no, in the case of Yuumi, her W is a tether that moves Yuumi to be on top of anyone that she applies it to. So what this would mean is that if you shot a ability at Yuumi, it would not hit her because she's immortal. The only thing you could hurt was her teammate. But Yuumi was designed as an enchanter. And unlike other enchanters in the game, who are literal balloons, and the moment you catch them, they pop like a balloon, Yuumi was able to tether herself to her teammate who had escape tools. And if they died, she could tether onto another person, and then tether to another, and then to another, and then to another. And simply put, Yuumi was able to just constantly evade people. While at the same time, all of the stats that she built were bleeding into her teammate. She was pretty much a item that people had as a teammate. And her ultimate, or like all of her abilities were just designed around like this new player feeling of giving them the tools to succeed. We had a slow and poke damage with the Q. We had the ability to recover mana with like an auto attack and then just pop back in. We had a heal on the E, and then the ultimate, I believe it dealt damage and rooted. Did it heal too?
No, it was just dealt damage and rooted.
Okay. But simply put, the big problem with this character was that she was just a stat boost as a character. You just slap her onto your carry, and they just win. So, and this was a big problem in League, especially with a lot of other reworks like Taric.
So
the Taric Yi Chinese funnel comp. So I still remember those days.
I was a Yuumi main when she first came out. Anyways, I'm going to show a clip on stream real quick of Yuumi. And just I'm going to, okay, for everyone watching, I know the quality's bad. This was back when I didn't know what I was doing. The guy right here with Desu at the back of the name is my teammate. It's my duo. You will see me right there on this person. I'm the cat right there. I attach myself to my carry. I'm going around healing. The enemy can't attack me. They can't do anything to attack me.
Yep.
There's nothing they can do. I'm just sitting here healing everybody for literally no cost.
And Yumi was a very good example of a character who people argued about skill expression. A
Hmm.
lot of people said that Yumi was just a dumb character. She had no skill expression, that she was easy, and she was a very good example of a character that you had to keep bad, because the moment that she became good, she became a pro scene problem,
Hmm.
where she was just seen every single time.
And
And even a lot of pro players argued that Yumi as a character just could not work.
so my point with bringing up Yumi, though, the main point I wanted to bring up, Yumi did something kind of like Skull Merchant did that we talked about earlier, where she took a class that has a traditional problem with them, which is the
Hmm.
Enchanter class. It's the problem with Enchanter classes or in League is they pop like a
They
balloon.
are,
They're very
yep,
squishy.
exactly.
Once they're caught out on their own, they're dead. That's how they
But at the
work.
same time, they have to be out on the battlefield near their teammates in order to support them. Like, they have range to them, obviously, but at the same time, it's not immense range. They aren't cross map
Hmm.
healing you, unless it's Soraka, but even then, it's an alt.
But
Reg-
but
Long story
Yumi,
short, you catch them out and they die. But Yumi did not die because she was untargetable. She would just latch onto a teammate and you had to mow through the teammate. But
mhm.
even when you did that, she would just move on to the next meat shield.
So with Skull Merchant, and we brought this up a few times, she took the problems that trap and intel killers have, which is a lack of anti-loop, and she added it in. She took their
Yeah,
weakness and added the thing to compensate for it. And I think it's
yeah.
another big problem she has. And I don't think, and we mentioned this a couple times, this isn't going to fix that. This is going to make it
Mm.
worse.
I agree. It's going to make things 1,000% worse. She is going to just be pushed into a lot more negative gameplay styles, with her going back immediately to gen defense. And all of the variety of gameplay styles that she used to be able to go, they're just going to go extinct. Because why bother going with like Wendy's Merchant with prototype router and low prof or low power mode? Why bother going with stealth builds or haste manipulation or hinder manipulation? Or like any of these fun builds that you can try out as Skull Merchant. Why bother? Because you know you're going to get immediately destroyed because she has nothing.
But
So the only option you have, like Freddy, is gen defense to keep you in the match long enough for you to play.
the other thing with Skull Merchant I do want to bring with similarities to Yumi is people wanted her gone.
Oh, easily. Yumi, the moment she dropped, people thought she was adorable. People loved the idea, but some people had concerns about the gameplay. And then it took like a week, and people saw that she had like a win rate of like 30%. But that was because people were taking flash on Yumi.
Um,
Um, but after like 2 or 3 weeks where people started learning how the character worked, everyone realized, oh, she's just a free item that makes your carry immortal. And there's nothing you can do about it. Because you try to kill the carry, she's keeping him alive. And when he finally does pop, she goes on to the next carry and keeps him immortal.
they tried with Yumi though. One thing they
Yeah,
did
they
was
did try.
her passive was designed to get her off of people. That was
Mm.
the whole point of her passive, but it didn't give enough of a benefit to do that. That's a
Because why bother? Because enchanters have mana regen items for a reason. So
um,
why give her a mana regen passive when she already has like 20 items that give her mana regen? Plus she doesn't need to buy boots like other enchanters. She can buy more mana regen.
but what Riot learned from Yumi, or not what Riot learned, but what Riot did to Yumi, I think is something that we can also learn for Skull Merchant, because they
Mm.
didn't nerf Yumi into the ground. That's not what they ended up doing. They just
Yeah,
changed her power budget. That's all
yeah.
they did. They shifted her power away from her ability to keep people alive and more to
Mm.
being an annoyance, which some people still hate to this day. But she became, rather than an enchanter that keeps her carry alive and gives them lots of these buffs, because she can still do that, just not as good as she did. What she
Mm.
does now is mostly her Q. Her Q, because they made it so it can't be, because it used to work, you could like fully directionally control it. They
Yeah,
made it so after a little bit, it just shoots off in a straight line. So you can
yeah.
control it
And I will
slightly.
say,
Yeah.
with the passive of her W, I believe, they made it so the person that you're tethered to the longest gains the stat boosting from Yumi.
Yes.
So the idea with this is more so to keep her in line with being the support for the ADC. So you don't just go like, oh, my ADC is trolling, I'm going to slap myself onto the top laner. Now they're unstoppable. This is more so a idea of Yumi being, hey, I'm going to help you through this situation. I'm going to give you the stats to help you persevere. And when we finally get to the game, or like the late game, I will always be there to help you out, but I can't just swap myself onto someone else and boost them up because I haven't been with them for like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Or I've been with them for 2 seconds, but the AD carry I've been here since day one.
But my point with Skull Merchant is I feel like they can do the same thing and not
Yep.
what they're doing. Because what they're doing here is all of these are nerfs. There
Exactly.
isn't a single thing of compensation here. We're not switching around her power budget. We're not making her anti-loop better. We're just removing one, so by proxy, the other one becomes better. And not even better, just the only option.
There is one buff, which is the drone scan lines are invisible beyond 16 meters. But that is just a poor man's excuse for removing the stealth mode. It doesn't change the fact that when you look up, you see a flying skull in the air.
But like, I think at the end of all of this, and I'm glad to see that most of the community seems to be in agreement, even with most of the people who hate her. There are some exceptions. Also, I do want to bring up something because someone brought this up to me yesterday, because someone was talking about knockout, and I was like, and it got discussed, and someone was like, yeah, they should, basically they said the same thing. Like, they tried to take like what I said about Skull Merchant and tried to like make me sound like a hypocrite. Here is the difference with what they're doing to Skull Merchant versus what they should do to Knockout. Knockout shouldn't be changed because it's unfun. Knockout should be changed because it's unhealthy. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Skull Merchant is unfun. I don't think they're ever going to change that with her inherent design. I don't think they're ever going to change that.
Yeah, every single Skull Merchant knows this. They realize, the character is not everyone's cup of tea. But at the same time,
she's not unhealthy.
They understand she's not a menace. They understand she's not breaking the game like Skull Merchant 1.0. Skull Merchant 2.0, in actuality, is playing much more as a normal killer. Yeah. The only difference is that we have a player base who are working on a history of infamy and hatred towards the 1.0 being carried to the 2.0, and then we have these players who are going like, I really don't like this character. Other people should know this feeling too. And then we have, and I feel like you would know this when it comes to Chucky and a few other characters. There are some people who play certain killers very maliciously. So you know how people always cry about Wesker and Chucky hyper carry? Yeah. Or like hyper tunnel? And then there are people that go like, oh, every single Twins slugs or every single Skull Merchant camps.
Yeah.
Not every single Skull Merchant camps. In fact, a lot of the people who main Skull Merchant actually play her really nicely because they want to have a normal game. The problem is they're working with a time bomb that has a very, very, very short fuse, and they're attempting to cut that wire to make sure the fire doesn't go off.
I mean, it's just like with when Billy got his rework, everyone was like, "Oh, all Billy's do is just camp, tunnel, and slug." No. Here's what happened. To Billy. His play rate like tripled after his rework. It's not that all Billy's camp, tunnel, and slug. It's that a lot of killers started playing Billy, and a lot of killers camp, tunnel, and slug.
Yeah,
that's what happened.
Yeah, a lot of low MMR killer players just happened to be playing Billy, but they were doing very malicious things. And the same thing happens with every single killer across the rainbow. Simply put, Skull Merchant is not immune to this. Obviously, she's going to have problems of players playing her very maliciously. The problem is that we have this infamy on the character already, and because of these low MMR players just carrying on and going like, oh, I'm going to slug and camp and tunnel and all these things as Skull Merchant, when there are killers out there who can tunnel more maliciously, like in the case of Camper Brain Chucky and 8% Hinder on Wesker. And there are the killers who are like, oh, I can slug, and then they play Twins. There are people who play these characters very maliciously, and they do it intentionally. But at the same time, there are people who play these killers, and they just want to play to have fun. They just want to play a normal game of Dead by Daylight. But because of these awful audiences who just follow up with this idea of just negativity, it just bleeds into the character's infamy.
I think another thing with it is a chicken and the egg situation too, for Skull Merchant in particular, because there's a lot of people who do that because they know everyone hates Skull Merchant, but everyone hates Skull Merchant because people do that. So
exactly,
which happened first?
Yeah,
I think the hate happened first because of the chess merchant.
Yeah, like I think the hate happened for the character because I asked this and one guy replied to me very not mean, but he said no, character still sucks XD. I said it was like a Twitter post from a long time ago. I said, what were to happen if Wesker was released in between Knight and Skull Merchant's release window? So let's say instead of Dredge, Wesker, Knight, Skull Merchant, it was Dredge, Knight, Wesker, Skull Merchant. Would have that hate for Skull Merchant been as heavy as it was?
No, I don't think it would.
Because I feel like the big reason we came with such hatred was because Knight brought the 3-gen meta with Eruption. And although Eruption did get nerfed with the Skull Merchant patch, she was a killer who was very weak, and she needed help. But at the same time, the developers didn't know what to do with her just yet because she was new. They didn't know what the player base were going to do with the character just yet. But at the same time, people were playing the Gen Kick meta. There was the 3-gen meta that was every single killer's cup of tea. The only problem was Skull Merchant 1.0 was really, really, really good at holding down locations because information is a very powerful tool at lockdown.
She was a zone control killer back then. She kind of is now, but not nearly as much as she was. But and I've mentioned this before, especially like even if it wasn't 3-gen, I think people still would have grown to hate the old Skull Merchant.
Yeah.
Because there's one in this game in particular, there is one thing people hate in this game, and it's zoning. And the fact that there was a killer designed to literally zone an entire area without even being there, that probably wasn't the best decision.
Yeah, and I mentioned this already a while ago, but I just find it funny that after the release of Knight and Skull Merchant, the developers have been rather selectively safe with their character designs. Whereas we got Singularity, who's able to rush through things, Xenomorph, Chucky, Unknown, Vecna, and Dracula, who are able to zone and loop, or like Antiloop. I feel like with the success of Wesker, and the absolute hatred towards Skull Merchant and Knight, they ended up going like, okay, let's make more characters like Wesker, and less characters like Skull Merchant and Knight. And I will say this.
The thing is, though, people are starting to hate Dracula. People already hate Chucky. People hate Xenomorph. People are learning to hate. I swear it's because of the stats they put out the other day. People are hating on Vecna now, too. I've been seeing a lot of it today.
I think the only killer people don't hate is Unknown. But then again, how could you hate him? Look at that gorgeous smile.
Honestly, I do a lot of these with a lot of killer mains. I talk to a lot of the community. I'm in it a lot. From what I can gather, and I'm working on like a thing to actually like cross-reference this, there are not very many killers that are like universally not hated.
Yeah.
And like the ones that are, Wesker is one of them. Wesker, for the most part, people enjoy Wesker on both sides. For the most part, there's always the outliers, and that's really the only one.
Like, I feel like in the case of Wesker, he was just such a breath of fresh air because he just felt, gameplay-wise, he felt so uniquely different from any other killer that came out in the previous time. Because the only other mobility killer that we got outside of like Dredge was Blight. And people liked Blight because of the skill expression that he had. So when Wesker came out, it's like, oh, we have a brand new mobility killer that doesn't have map RNG to worry about with Dredge.
So,
and
I mean,
the case of, sorry,
I was gonna say the other thing with it is like, because another killer who was universally loved for a while and has actually started getting hate over the past few months is Oni. And the reason Oni was so well liked, and I still hold to this, he's a really well designed killer.
Yeah.
who
I agree.
has one very big problem.
The 180 flick?
No,
Whoa! Not the 180 flick?
your
Inconceivable.
teammates can screw you over.
Oh! Well, that's happens with every single killer you play against.
Yeah, but Oni's is more in particular because part of the power budget
Yeah,
of his ability or his power is that he has to get it. So it's
true,
allowed to be
true.
stronger.
Yeah, because you can't flame the one teammate on your team who fed him blood at like 5 seconds.
I'm
Like I will say, whenever I see Oni, I'm just super happy because I love playing against Oni. I think the player base for Oni are some of the most zen people out there, which is kind of ironic considering Oni is just constantly angry all the time.
yeah, even
But at the same time, when I see Oni, I think to myself, "Oh, I'm gonna be so happy." Then 5 seconds later, I see it injure. I'm like, "Oh, never mind."
I mean, even killers that used to be universal, like Demogorgon's another one. People used to really like Demogorgon. He was like the poster child of like
Mm,
what people wanted the killer to be, like for both sides, right?
yeah, like I will say, Demogorgon back then, like I will say this with Demo and Wesker to an extent. The problem that I had with these two killers was the player base and their viewpoint on how well they could get away with certain things.
Mm-hmm.
When they retired Stranger Things from Dead by Daylight because of licensing issues, all of a sudden, all Demogorgon players could get away with whatever scummy playstyle they wanted. Because this was a legacy character now. This
Mm-hmm.
was a character that very few people had, so the moment that you saw it, it was like seeing the holy grail of killer players. So Demogorgons could camp you, they could tunnel you, they could slug you, they could hump tech you, they could do anything they wanted. And you were not allowed to complain about that character or its player base. Because they were a legacy character. They were perfectly fine to do whatever they wanted. Then we had Wesker, who was seen as objectively one of the best killer releases in the game. And the same thing happened with Wesker. He had such a high player count that you got a bunch of matches where Wesker players played him like a normal human being. I had this one Wesker who just constantly nodded at me every single time he hit me on hook. And I'm not allowed to complain about it because it's Wesker. He is perfectly fine to do whatever he wants. He can camp, he can tunnel, he can slug. It's a Wesker player. He's wholesome. He's Giga Chunkus wholesome, according to some people. But as time moved on, as Demogorgon moved away from Legacy because the licensing came back, and people started to calm down about their absolute love for Wesker, they started realizing, yeah, no, this is a little bit scummy. But when Skull Merchant, the moment she tries to play like a normal character, no! You dare play like a M1 character by placing your drone at that pallet? I am killing myself on hook. I am disconnecting from the match. I am reporting you and you're gonna get perma banned.
I mean, like looking through all the killers, it's like I see hate for Trapper all the time
Mm,
on both sides. To be fair, um, I see hate for Wraith. I see hate for New Hillbilly. I see hate for Nurse. Huntress was fine until about 6 months ago. That's the funny thing about Huntress too. The hate for Huntress wasn't really there. I have been seeing it
yeah,
crop up more and more and more, and I think 2v8 pushed it to the other end. I think people
yeah.
really are starting to hate Huntress now.
I think with Huntress, it was not just 2v8, it was also the buffs that she
Yeah,
received.
that too.
Because
Yeah,
the logic was, oh, Huntress struggles on indoor maps, let's help her out. But the problem is, you could have given more locker spawns. This would have easily been a great buff for Huntress, a great buff for Trickster, and a great buff for Dredge, because Dredge struggles on a lot of maps because of locker spawn RNG.
not the good
But
dredges.
with the blessing of behavior's mental fortitude of 10 billion IQ, they thought to themselves, let's give her 2 extra hatchets while she still has extra hatchet add-ons. So now she holds 10.
Um,
And in the hands of like a average huntress, it's not the end of the world. But against a giga cracked huntress player, she could destroy people. Like, it was not fun going against a 10 hatchet huntress who had like 2 damage states in her hand every single chance she got.
Yeah, and then like I've seen hate for Michael too. I've seen Mikey
Hmm.
hate starting to crop up. Well, I mean it's always been there, but not just for
Yeah.
Tombstone. A lot of people just don't like playing against him because he's boring.
Yeah. Like,
Hag is kind of in a similar boat. People don't like playing against Hag because she's quote boring.
Yeah, in the case of Hag, though, I think she's just a weird character. Like, I feel like Hag, if she
She's
released in the modern day, she would actually be the new Skull Merchant
she's
because
Hag
she's
Hag
such a she's
Hag.
such an anomaly.
She's the anti-killer.
Yeah, on one side we have the people who suck at the character and say that she's F tier. On the other side we have the people who play her really well, but still say that she's like C tier. And then there are the people who don't play her, but the moment they see her, S, immediate S, triple S.
She's the she's the anti-killer. She doesn't chase.
Yeah, it's just so weird. Like, she has such a unique gameplay style that it's hard to rank her compared to everyone else. It's why it's so tough.
Yeah, and then like Doctor, I've seen. I mean, people have always hated Doctor, but
Yeah,
honestly, actually, I'm not gonna lie. I think Doctor people are starting to like Doctor more and more.
Yeah, I still remember. So I started playing Dead by Daylight around the time that Trickster was getting leaked. But one of the content creators I love to watch Dead by Daylight content on was Bricky, and he called Doctor the DC King. And when I played against Doctor, I understood why, but at the same time, after I learned how to land skill checks because my PC wasn't a potato, I realized, oh yeah, this character's not that terrible to play against. I mean, against old Doctor, when the old Ruin used to be a thing, I could easily see that being obscenely annoying. But nowadays, no, I think he's perfectly fine. And the buffs just make him a little bit nicer.
I think
I
think people like Bubba now too.
I mean, in the case of Bubba, people have always loved him as a meme character. Like, Bubba just holds the legacy of being the basement insidious camping Bubba. And that is annoying for some people, but at the same time, a lot of people just troll with it just for the memes.
And then Freddy, I've actually seen Freddy hate popping up too. People don't like Freddy's boring to play against.
Yeah, let's complain about the character who sets a puddle that takes like 5 millennia to set up, and you need to be asleep to be affected by it.
Yeah, people don't like. Well, once again, that's the thing, because when you're playing against Freddy, you're literally for the most part, you're playing against a just an M1 killer. So it's not. There's nothing exciting going on.
Yeah, can I say something about Freddy?
Huh.
I am so confused about his kill rate. Why is he like the 3rd or 4th highest kill rate killer in the game?
I know the answer. I know the answer.
Because I know the answer too. It's because low MMR players just don't know how to play.
It's not low MMR.
It's not low MMR? Oh my goodness.
I will show you.
They actually know how to read?
I will show you Nightlight stats. Freddy's kill rate on Nightlight is 60%.
Oh, the joy. He's finally climbing the ranks again.
It's always been that high on Nightlight.
Yeah.
Now, here's actually, let me double check that if it has. I could be wrong. It's been like that recently. April 2023. Yeah, no, it's play rate. Kill rate. Kill rate. Yeah, his kill rate has slowly been creeping up. But the reason why I was looking at the wrong one. The reason why his kill rate is as high as it is because he's easy.
Yeah.
When you play Freddy, and I've noticed this because whenever stream makes me play Freddy, I almost always 4K. And the reason why is because when you're playing Freddy, you don't have to think about anything.
Nope, you're just playing an M1 killer with a little extra cosmetic of a puddle.
So you can just focus on the basic fundamentals of M1 looping. Like, the most you have to think about maybe is like which gen to teleport to.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I do know a Freddy main who will disagree with this. Don't get me wrong, there are ways to play him in like really unique ways with puddle placement and things like that, which is good.
Yeah, of course.
That is true. But for the most part, when you're playing Freddy, you're just a basic M1 killer. You're not thinking about much. You're doing the bare fundamentals. Your macro can be better because of it. Like, it's not like with Skull Merchant, for example, where you're thinking about drone placement, the rotation speed of the drones, whether you can laser tag, keeping track of claw traps, keeping track of stacks on each person. Should I recall this drone? Should I put this drone down? Do I need the undetectability here? Is this a good area for the drone to be? Like, you're not thinking about all that crap when you're playing Freddy. That's why his kill rate's as high as it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also, I will say I think low MMR also has an impact when it comes to Freddy, because people don't know how the dream world works.
Well, see, I would say that, and I would agree with you on that, except for this is Nightlight.
Hmm.
So this
Oh,
is self-reported.
true. The self-reported, meaning that we have players that actually have decent stat or play patterns. Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
this is actually interesting. But I will admit, lower MMR does have an impact on a lot of stats. Also, it has a lot of stats, is or stat manipulation, especially if it's a killer with a very, very low pick rate, because you're pulling from a very small pool.
Yeah, that is
If
true.
Yeah, like I'll give you an example. If I were to tell you the one killer got a 50% kill rate and another got a 70% pick rate, which one do you think would have performed better?
The the one with the low pick rate.
Yeah, the one with the 70%, or no, kill rate, sorry, kill rate. So, like, one has a 50% kill rate, the other has a 70% kill rate. Which one do you think performed better?
I mean, statistically, it would be the 50% because there's more people playing it. I would assume.
Or no, I'm saying, like, kill rate. This is, like, how many people are dying in a match against
Oh,
this character.
the 70%. Then yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth about these stats. That person with the 50% kill rate, they have played 100 matches and have won 4Ks every 50, or of those 50.
Mm-hmm.
The person that has a 70% kill rate has played 10 matches and only won 7 4Ks.
Exactly. Yeah. That's
If you
what.
break down the data like that, then you begin to realize something is a little bit off. And this is very much the case when it comes to niche killers. It's very hard to rate them because they have very low data pools to work with. In the case of something like Huntress and Wesker, you're able to easily tell that these characters are being carried by the mains, but at the same time they're being pulled down by the new players. In the case of a niche character like Skull Merchant or Trickster, or even like Twins, you are pulling mostly from the main audience because the new players don't want to play them. The casual audience don't want to play them. These are dedicated people who decided, I want to play these characters. So these start to blow up, but at the same time, it's pulled down by some people who don't know everything about the character that leak in.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of characters like Huntress and Wesker, we have so many players that it's able to blend itself quite nicely. But in the case of the other niche options, it's just super inflating up, which is why I still worry about what happens if a character is disliked enough that we see a Skull Merchant situation again for like a character like Trickster or Clown or Twins or Hag, who have very niche audiences, and it's very easy to blow up their stats because
It,
they get low game rates.
it's happening with Twins right now.
Mm,
From what I've heard from the Twins players I do know, it's happening with Vecna right now too.
mm,
A lot of Vecna players I know are getting a lot of people giving up on Hook
yeah,
immediately.
like
Not even DCing, just giving up on Hook.
yeah. I think this also has to do with player mentality because we have seen the casual audience just become a lot more aggressive in what games they want to play. Because if they don't like anything, like any tiny little thing about the game they dislike, they're going to give up instantly.
Mm-hmm.
Like this isn't new. Like all Dead by Daylight, I've seen like I never played Dead by Daylight during the early days, but I watched a lot of content on Dead by Daylight, and even I could tell like there were people who disconnected games if they didn't like it. And it wasn't super rare to see them. It would happen every once in a while, but not to the extent that it is happening at this current day and age. Like the amount of people who are trolling and giving up has just raised way too high.
I, I'm gonna. Here's my logic with that too. I brought this up before. Dead by Daylight doesn't have an incentive.
Mm,
There's no reason to play a match out. Like, what do you get? Blood points? Okay, well, I already own everything. What do I need them for?
exactly.
And then it's like, okay, well, there's no rank system. I can't see the MMR. Devotion doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So what? And don't get me wrong. Like, I get the people who are going to be like, oh, well, you should just play it for fun. That only gets you so far in a game. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. You should play a game because it's fun. This is true, but
Mm-hmm.
we're humans. we need a goal. We need something to go for. If there's nothing to go for other than the fun aspect, people are going to give up the moment they stop having fun, which I would say people need to stop playing the game if they're not having fun, but not every match is going to be fun. This is true for every video game in existence.
Mm.
But Dead by
I think
Daylight is unique because for some reason it's fine.
yeah. Like, I will say, I'm one of the very few people who actually wouldn't mind if we return to the old grade system that we used to have.
I don't think it would be any different than what we have now.
Yeah, like, obviously, we still have the big old problem, but at least it's like a visual clue of telling the player, hey, you are actually reaching up, up, up. And it's like, the reason that you are playing is to get all the way up to Iridescent 1. But in the case of
Then
now,
what?
it's just blood points. In the case of back then, it was like a title that you were able to say. Like, am I playing in green ranks? Am I playing in copper ranks? Like, nowadays it's just for blood point incentive.
Yeah,
But back then, it
but,
was for like a title.
but even back then, once you hit Area 1, then what?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing. Like, the game needs something.
And I really feel like the fact that the current grade system removed the ability to lose the grade. It has a double-edged effect. On one side, it's great for the people who just want the blood points, but at the same time, it really hurts the people who were trying to reach that title. And if they fail, there's no reason for them to cry about it, because they're just not going to gain a grade, or like pip. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't lose pips.
It's funny to think that I didn't play, because I started playing when Nemesis came out.
Mm.
So I wasn't even around for the old grade system that long.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, because
Like,
it happened when Pinhead came out.
I know that a lot of people always made memes about like, oh, am I in green ranks? I remember there was like a Zubat video where it's like the MMR system put me in green ranks or something like that, and we just see this ghost face who's just walking around and he has no idea what he's doing.
But I mean, the thing with it though is like even now though, I do know plenty of new players who get confused by the grades.
Mm.
Because I've had people tell me like, why am I playing? I'm Erie 1. Why am I playing with like bad players? It's like because that's not.
Because that's not how it works. We have an invisible number to work on.
So
Who doesn't love the
so
methodology?
like the thing is that means it's working on new players. Like that's still an incentive for newer players, right?
Yeah.
But for
But
veterans, like what is like, and I think that's the thing with the DCs and the giving up on Hook is it's like it's more of a veteran problem, it seems.
yeah.
Because it's like once again, like once you have like 2,000 hours in this game, and you maybe now with how much is in it, it's generous, but so you have 3,000 hours in this game, you own all the killers, all the survivors, you have all the perks, you have all the add-ons you could ever need. Now what?
I feel like with the DC penalty too, this ended up being a bit of a double-edged sword as well in a sense. Because when the DC penalty wasn't a thing, people would just disconnect their games, and you weren't left with a bot back then. It was just the player was completely removed out.
Mm-hmm.
And this was helpful in very awkward situations where you were in a lobby with a cheater. So you go into a game, there's a cheater, you just disconnect, no penalty. You get to go in next. That's fine. It was useful in situations where players were exploiting perk bugs, because we didn't have the kill switch back then. And even nowadays, I think Behavior forget they have a kill switch. Like, I remember Wake Up used to have a bug, and Breakdown used to have a bug where it completely removed a hook from the game for the whole trial. And then, of course, we had Legion. Do you remember pre-launch Legion?
Yes.
Pre-launch Legion is probably the biggest mistake to ever happen in Dead by Daylight. People say that Skull Merchant 1.0 was worse. I disagree. Legion 1.0 was probably the worst thing to ever happen in Dead by Daylight. Because of the situation with Deep Wound, and how players found a clause to just Michael Jackson moonwalk against the survivor. They just go like, hee hee, I'm going to chase you for like 10 seconds backwards. And if If you don't mend, you're going to die. And if you do mend, I'm going to hit you and you still die. There's nothing you can do about it. In the case of Skull Merchant, you just needed perks in order to get the 3-gen running. And if you were smart enough, you could disrupt the 3-gen. In the case of Legion, he was the weirdest anomaly where he was the best at getting everyone injured, but he had nothing to get the down. And the reason why I feel like people don't hate pre-launch Legion as much as Skull Merchant 1.0 is because people were able to disconnect during that time. There was no disconnect penalty, so the moment they saw that there was a Legion who was going to use this obnoxious playstyle, they just disconnected. In the case of Skull Merchant, however, there was the DC penalty. So, people were unable to disconnect without having to wait like 45 seconds, then a minute, then 5 minutes. And then they had to kill themselves on hook. And in general, I feel like it's this penalty that led to suicide on hook becoming a lot more popular. And also, I feel like it just helped to build up the negativity the character received.
I don't know. I think there needs to be a penalty, though. Even with the bots, I know some people use that as an argument. There has to be a penalty.
I agree. This game just cannot function at the moment without a penalty, especially with how many people are just giving up. But at the same time, a lot of people argue for its return. I say no, because literally it's just the worst idea of how the community is at the moment. It had its use back then. I feel like the developers should remove penalty if something really bad happens. Like if the cheating epidemic becomes way too bad again. But at the same time, I feel like it's the ultimate scapegoat tool, where it's a player that's just like, oh, I don't like this matchup, and the DC penalty is gone. Bye-bye! I'm not playing.
We saw what happened with the DC penalty removal, not last Halloween, but the Halloween before that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened. Every other match, 3 or 4 people, and this was before they had bots. Yeah, 3 or 4 people would just DC.
Yep.
Like the moment the color started winning. That's just how it was.
Yep.
There was no penalty for it during that time, so people would just do it. And that's the thing. A game can't function that way. Like I get it. I get it. Oh, you're not having fun. I want to leave. I get that, but like, I'm gonna make somebody mad saying this as a particular person I know who watches my videos.
Like if you decide to disconnect, you are busy throwing your other 3 teammates who loaded into the match under the bus. Because it's like, oh, I don't like this character? Well, tough, I'm not going to play. Same with the people who suicide on hook. The problem with them is that they are literally taking a whole player out of the equation. If you DC, you still get a bot. Granted, the bot does absolutely nothing, but at least it provides some moral support. It's there cheering you on. But in the case of the self-unhook attempt, it deletes a character from the game. It turns it into a 3v1. And back in the old Dead by Daylight, there used to be fun little matchup glitches where you would get into games with 3 survivors. You would get like 2 survivors in a game every once in a while. And people realize how difficult games like this are, because Dead by Daylight is designed around the 4v1. If you remove one player from that equation, all of a sudden the killer has less to worry about. They become a lot easier to tackle.
I mean, I think like the thing with it too is like, I can't think of another game where this is as big of a problem. Because like people are like, oh, it's not ranked, it doesn't matter. I played League for like 6 years.
Yeah.
There was never, like, people DC'd every now and again, but it was never as bad as it is in DBD.
Yeah, I think the big problem is that survivors don't have abilities. Like, in the case of League, you can still carry a game because of how you play and your abilities. But in the case of survivors, they're all uniform, outside of, like, perks that they run. But, like, they all obey the rules of survivor logic. So, you're playing 3 different survivors that have to obey their rules against a killer who can have different rule sets that they need to follow. And simply put, there are a lot of killers in the game that have very unique gameplay flows that you as a player might know how to play against, but your teammates probably don't. Like, Plague is a good example. Plague is probably one of the weirdest characters to play against because people either mass cleanse the moment that a bit of her puke touches them, or they never cleanse and they're all just broken. Like, there's no right answer to playing against any of these killers. Like, some of them it's very streamlined, but there are a variety of different ways to play against them. But at the same time, they have a variety of ways to counteract those playstyles. And especially with the higher MMR killers, they're able to get away with getting rid of like good survivor players by targeting the weaker players. And it's very clear with Nurse and Blight that the moment they see a good player, they still have the tools to deal with them. But if they still worry that they can't, they just go after the other bozo who has no idea what they're doing.
Well, and I think the other problem with it is also like in League, in Rainbow Six, in a lot of these other games, even Valorant to a degree, even if you're bad and having like playing against something you don't find very fun, you can kind of find ways to have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
Dead by Daylight doesn't really have that. Like,
I will.
let's say you run into a match and you
Mm-hmm.
play against use Skull Merchant as an example. You don't like playing against Skull Merchant. Like you don't like looping against Skull Merchant. You don't like playing against her. You don't like doing the drone minigame. So your options now are completely avoid chase as best as you can, which, depending on the player, might not even be possible, and just do generators.
Mm.
That's your option. There really isn't much else for you to do.
Yeah.
I think it's another problem with it.
Yeah, I feel like it's just lack of diversity with gameplay. I feel like Behavior have been using perks for way too long to try and promote different gameplay styles for survivors. When in reality, we just need something new for the base game.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
like. I love the fact that Castlevania gave us more tools for chests. Same with Lara Croft, because I feel like it's such a underutilized system in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it feels so pointless because
If you don't bring the
if
perk, it doesn't do anything.
yeah, exactly. So you decide, okay, I want to run Specialist from Lara Croft. Well, you need to run like 3 different perks to combo well with it, so your entire build is set up around Specialist. And you go in, and you still have to stress over RNG of the chests, and then you get a map or a key, which does absolutely nothing, especially if it's a broken key. But then you still have the chance to get like a toolbox, which can help you repair gen faster. You can get a med kit that can heal you, and a flashlight, which realistically does nothing, but it's just funny adrenaline moment for Nia Main's brain.
Well, I mean, the other problem is like you're going to be back on here for talk about perks, but
Oh, of
and
course.
we'll probably wrap this up here in a minute. But
Yeah.
another problem with it though is also consistency is a huge thing, and uh, feedback is another.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. I've said this so many times. I think the biggest problem with perks in this game isn't necessarily strength or even consistency. I think the problem is feedback.
Mm.
A good example I always bring up is chlorophobia.
Oh,
Chlorophobia,
chlorophobia.
chlorophobia could be a global wide reduces healing speed by 20% at all times. People
Mm.
still wouldn't run it because you have no idea what that is actually doing.
Yeah.
Like
Like,
there are so many good perks that people don't run because the feedback isn't there. There are people who say corrupt intervention isn't good.
are they sniffing something?
Well, no, it's because of that, because the feedback isn't there. What does it actually do for you? I know what it does for you,
Yeah.
but like,
Corrupt intervention brings survivors towards me. It's able to block the 3 furthest gens, so I don't have to stress about them. I only have 4 gens to worry about now. And I get people coming towards me while I'm going towards them, so that way I can start chases sooner.
but what is the inherent feedback it gives you?
Oh, I just blocked 3 generators across the map XD.
And then a gen pops anyways.
Blasted
That's
Dwight with his brand new parts.
that's the problem. It's just
Yeah,
like I said
like,
this. I said this before with Gearhead. I think Gearhead is a great perk. However,
mm,
if you don't happen to be looking in the direction when it goes off, it didn't even do anything for you.
yeah. I talked about this with Yoichi's perks in my Why No One Uses Yoichi video or Yoichi's perks video.
Mm-hmm.
It was specifically about parental guidance. This
Yeah.
was a perk that, for a long time, when it was on the PTB, people thought it was going to be insanely busted. A 10-second long window of not making sound, not leaving scratch marks or pools of blood from a stun, was incredibly powerful sounding. It was nerfed to 7 seconds because the developers stressed about it and they worried. They're like, oh poop, we don't want the perk breaking anything. So it was counter nerfed just to keep it mellow. However, no one runs the perk. Like, it has a very low pick rate. Hold on, let me
So speaking of
pull
that,
up Nightlight.
cough cough Lucky Star.
Oh, cough, cough, Lucky Star being updated. And I'm actually really sad that Lucky Star is being updated. Because Lucky Star, in my opinion, was what you called a thematic perk. These are perks that don't obey the base rules of Dead by Daylight. They're not meant to be good, they're not meant to be bad. They're meant to go with the dramatics of the character it comes with. So, a good example of a thematic perk is Soul Survivor on Laurie Strode. Everyone knows that Soul Survivor is a bad perk. No one runs it because it does nothing. It needs your teammates to die. But thematically, it perfectly fits Laurie Strode because it's a perk that gives you the tools to escape as the last survivor alive, fitting Laurie Strode as the final girl character. As a perk, explaining that ideology of Laurie Strode, it's perfect. But when it comes to balance and the base game of Dead by Daylight, it doesn't really function quite nicely. It's why I like thematic perks as the idea of like just being fun gimmicks to make you feel like you are that character. And Lucky Star, in my opinion, was a thematic perk for Ellen Ripley.
Yeah, but it's not losing its other effect.
Yeah. I still find it a little bit weird that they decided to change it still. But at the same time, I'm like, as long as it didn't get like deleted to become next meta perk 20.
My point with Lucky Star is that you can combine it with parental guidance now.
True. But yeah, like, hold on. Let me pull up the pick rate for parental. 0.33% on nightlight.gg, which I use for all of my videos for why no one uses. Like, people were saying this perk was going to become the next Iron Will. And now we never see it.
Yeah, and now Iron Will is the next Iron Will.
Yeah, exactly. We nerfed the perk because it was overused. Waited like 2 years and no one used it anymore. We're buffing it back, baby.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I said, we'll get into that whenever we can talk about perks. But
oh yeah, we're going to talk a lot about the perks in Dead by Daylight because there are a few which are rather special.
But Hero, I think we're gonna wrap it there because I think we said all we need to say about Skull Merchant. The only closing words,
obviously.
The only closing words I'm going to say: behavior. If you listen to any of this, I don't know if any devs watch my stuff, but if you do, don't go through with this. If you do anything that do the haste and the hinder thing, do that. The rest of this don't do. Try this, see what happens. If things go fine, then maybe we float around with the idea of this. But just only do this if you're going to do anything. Honestly, I don't think they should touch her at all. But if you're going to do something, do that.
Yeah. And if you really want to cook, you can look at the fun little infographics I made, because I'm probably going to post them on Twitter somewhere and say, behavior, please look at this.
And for a rework idea, you can
rework idea that you could probably do in like a week or two.
Yeah.
It took you like 3 weeks in order to put the rotation system for Skull Merchant with no animations. Surely you could do that.
I mean, the major rework idea I came up with, I made on the spot during this.
Yeah, exactly. You've had a whole year behavior. Checkmate. I made this rework in 2 days.
In any case, to those listening on the YouTube, I love you guys. Have a good one. And, yeah. Actually, hang on. Before I do that, Hero, where can people find you? But, Hero's links will be below for anyone who's interested. You should watch, by the way. I watched, like, every single video. We actually started talking because I commented on, I think it was your Freddy video.
It might have been the Freddy video or video before.
It was one of them because I just remember we had like a really we were conversating about a Blood
Mm.
Warden change where it or no, a Remember Me change where I said it should be
Yeah,
like
remember me.
where
And I think I made comments to you about on Pixel's video too about the Skull Merchant update and my
mm,
personal feelings on the rework.
yeah, yeah, because I had the idea for Remember Me they could add an effect where when you start opening exit gates the killer's terror radius starts.
Mm,
I don't think it would be good, but I think it would be thematic.
yeah.
Because I mean, any smart person would realize, oh, it's coming from there. But um,
Meanwhile, here I am creating a rework for Remember Me to go with the attic scene from the movie because, like the genius that I was, I decided let's watch the Freddy 2010 remake movie. Surely it's not that bad, and I can get an idea out of it.
when I did, have you seen my Chucky concept video?
I have not yet. I actually need to.
You should watch it. My Chucky concept video, I brag about this all the time. I did it a month before he was revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the I watched every movie. I watched the TV show at the time was up to season 2. I watched
Mm-hmm.
all of it. I got so much right, but also so much wrong. Like the biggest thing I didn't call was a third person camera because who the fuck would have been able to predict that?
Yeah, no, like we are going to take the spirit out of Chucky's body and we're going to make a third person because Twins is a character in the game, and we realize the horrible trauma of running around as the Goblin Child. Please
I
forgive us about that.
But no, I predicted scampering. I predicted
Mm,
the undetectability. I predicted the 110 movement speed. I predicted him having a slower vault, unless he
yeah.
was in power.
Speaking about predictions, I predicted a lot of changes that behavior have done for perks. Like when I was working on the Twins video, I recommended the idea of giving Twins 2 tokens per generator completion.
For
And
coup.
then I was halfway through editing the video, and then the Twins update came out with the coup de grace buff, and I'm just like, are you serious? I spent a whole month on this stupid video, and behavior just posts the day I'm about to release this thing. Hey, here is coup de grace, now gains 2 tokens. And
Yeah,
then there were a few other changes that I asked for too. And every single time I'm like, huh, I'm kind of scary good at this.
didn't you did a video on Hattie's perks, right?
Hades perks? Yeah,
Yeah. What did
it was the first video that I made that worked on all 3 of the why everyone uses videos.
what
Where
what did you say for inner focus? Do you remember?
Oh, for inner focus, I said make it a boon perk because
Oh,
Michaela casted a magic spell to turn it into a boon inner focus, which made scratch marks from your teammates in it blue. And I'm trying to remember. I think the killer injuring inside that boon range would reveal the aura to your teammates. I don't remember because this is like 2 or 3 years ago. But I
what
do remember I made it a boon concept because I wanted more boon totems in the game.
what is Skull Merchant's third perk?
Leverage, thwack, and game of foot.
Game of okay, okay. I was just thinking about this. Yeah, the Game of Foot's the only one that I don't think Game of Foot needs to be touched. I think it's fine. It serves its niche.
Have you not seen Minskull's video? Clearly, it's a problem.
Minskull made a video saying,
Yeah, he said Rancor Game of Foot with Noed and on any killer like Wraith is secretly unhealthy for the game and must be deleted now.
I mean, I can see the argument. I don't agree with it, but I can see the arguments.
Speaking about arguments about characters, and since we are talking about Skull Merchant perks, let's talk about the funny drone lady herself. And we've come full circle.
There you go. There's
The editing magic has worked.
There you go. I forgot to do. But if you are listening on the YouTubes, I love you guys. Have a good one, and yeah, bye.